The protagonist faced a somewhat embarrassing moment when two children approached her. They observed the maid's food with great curiosity, showing their eagerness to taste a bite. The young lady was visibly surprised by the unexpected appearance of two hungry children in front of her. The lady did not understand what had happened, as she was sure that just moments ago she was working in a supermarket, restocking ramen. Due to the big discount, many elderly people started disputes and scuffles to get the product. The conflict grew more and more, to the point where they started throwing merchandise that hadn't been bought yet. While picking it up, the protagonist sighed heavily, tired of it all and wishing to quit that job. But because she suddenly started losing her sight, the girl thought she was suffering from a drop in blood pressure. But in an instant, her hands, which were holding the package of ramen, were illuminated by a bright sunlight. The girl regained consciousness, and both the loss of vision and the terrible weakness in her body disappeared. The young lady looked around and realized she was in an unfamiliar place, and very untidy. Looking at herself in the mirror, the protagonist saw an unknown girl she had never seen before. From the clothes, she supposed the lady in front of her was medieval, but the reflection was holding the same thing as her. The protagonist decided she was having a very strange dream due to exhaustion, but to her surprise, she felt hungry in the dream, so she decided to eat first, and looked for the kitchen. That's how the girl found herself in that ambiguous situation, where the children were asking for food. Although it was a dream, she felt sorry for the children and offered them ramen, inviting them to eat it. One of the brothers happily accepted, but the other tried to restrain himself, as they had been beaten shortly before. Not understanding what was happening, the girl decided to explain that the food was not poisoned and was edible, and as proof, the protagonist decided to demonstrate how the ramen should be eaten. Twirling noodles onto the fork, the lady hurried to eat with great appetite. This scene and the aromas further awakened the children's ravenous appetite. Stating that it was delicious, the boss offered to let them try her food, and one of the brothers instantly accepted. Although spicy, the food was so delicious that tears sprang to the child's eyes. The young lady didn't want to deprive anyone, and, seeing the second child's hesitation, invited him to eat with them. The maid insisted with the children, assuring them everything was fine, while swallowing another forkful of noodles. Although dirty and stained, the child tried to restrain himself. Saliva was running down his chin. Unable to resist any longer, he also tasted that strange food, which pleased the maid. After tasting it, the second child also noticed the flavor of the dish, and the first one immediately asked for more. Holding nothing back, the protagonist gave everything to the unknown twins. Happy, the two children fell to the ground laughing, enjoying great joy. Noticing the children's charm, the young lady warned that if they kept lying on the floor, they wouldn't digest the food. Surprised, one of the brothers asked if it wasn't that young lady who said the floor was suitable for them. Upon hearing the maid's name, the protagonist went into shock, as her head was flooded with information. And with every new question about Aileen's strange behavior, memories flooded the maid's mind. Faced with such an avalanche of unexpected information, the maid was stunned and replied nothing. It was a novel called Begging for Healing, where the protagonist awakens as a saint. In the work, the saint devoted herself to healing all men, and the character she reincarnated into was Aileen Harleen, the nanny of the twin princes. Born to a concubine who was a maid, that very woman was the instigator who mistreated the abandoned children and turned them into villains. The happier and more confident prince was named Louis Richard. The second, much more cautious and reserved, was Evan Richard. The novel takes place in an empire. Richard, the first emperor, took a dragon as a companion, granting special powers to his heirs, amazing physical abilities, and a special energy that surpass human limits, even the ability to foresee or overwhelming magical strength. The twins awakened their magic at the age of 8, and at the beginning of the original story, they killed Aileen and fled. The protagonist decided to find out the children's age. To understand how much time she had left, Evan reproached Aileen, who had forgotten even their age. They were 7 years old, which greatly saddened the young lady. The maid became distressed because, even after reincarnating, she was not the protagonist, and she would not have a romantic relationship with a handsome man. The lady understood that the novel's heroine dated many handsome men, while she was just a simple maid at the beginning of the original story. Realizing she was destined to die at the hands of the children, the maid began to take maximum care of them. While Eileen remembered why the place seemed so abandoned, Louis asked why the maid was so kind to them today. At these words, the protagonist was shocked, since she hadn't done anything special, smiling and taking one of the brothers by the hand. The girl declared that she would now always be kind to them. Louis was surprised by these words and hoped that the next day would come as soon as possible. But Evan did not speak to her, showing his discontent and mistrust towards Aileen's words. Before saying goodbye to the princes, the protagonist wished the children a good night. The protagonist's heart twisted seeing their silent facial expression. She did not want to die. Falling asleep, an unknown force surrounded her again, transporting the maid to a new place. Looking around, Aileen realized she was in a supermarket, so she assumed she had returned. Upon finding a mirror, the lady convinced herself she was still in the body of the novel's heroine. The girl did not understand the place she had fallen into, but an unexpected beep attracted her attention. It was a strange white creature, adorable and round, running somewhere wanting to show the young lady something. A little bewildered, the protagonist asked it to wait for her. She couldn't keep up with it. She noticed that the animal ran towards the cash register and hid in a box. After catching it, the protagonist couldn't understand if she had a kitten in front of her or a dog. Receiving no answer, the young lady began to inspect the surroundings and noticed something in a box. The girl didn't know why, but in the box, besides the animal, there was a jar of chocolate. The young lady immediately thought that this sweet must be very pleasing to the children. And after that thought, she began to wake up again in the world of the novel. After looking around, the girl immediately realized she was in the prince's room, but she couldn't see where the children had gone. While the protagonist was recovering, she felt an object in her hand. Looking, the maid was very surprised and somewhat perplexed, as she was holding a jar of cocoa. Aileen decided to examine the contents, as she didn't understand how it got there. Upon tasting it, she understood that it was real chocolate, the one she took in her dream at the hypermarket. While enjoying the sweet, the maid doubted that such a thing was possible. After thinking about it, the protagonist decided that the supermarket was a possible reincarnation, and she would find clues in dreams. But her train of thought was interrupted by an unexpected scream from the children. Coming from the kitchen, there were the maids mocking the children while Louis tried to get bread. The ladies, furious, mockingly asked if the children were hungry, why didn't they try this bread? Evan tried to stop Louis, but he didn't want to give up as he was starving. Insisting on mistreating the children, one lady implied that if one didn't submit, the maids would deny them bread. The young lady extended her hands towards Louis, but his brother hit the maid's hand. Evan was furious about the mistreatment of his kind brother. At this, both women became enraged and looked at the twins with contempt. Enraged and shouting at Evan, one of the maids lunged at the boy. Protecting his kind brother, the little boy was already preparing to take the blow. But suddenly, a can of cocoa flew towards the woman who was trying to hit the prince. Both ladies were stunned, not understanding who dared to do that to them. Then Aileen, with a scathing and imposing look, acknowledged her action with pride. The maids felt great relief seeing their friend, as they feared it was an inspection. The ladies swore they were only joking with the princes, but she didn't trust them and asked the children. But Evan remembered that Aileen said she would never trust them. Understanding everything, the protagonist felt uncontrollable fury and slapped both maids. Immediately after, she announced their immediate dismissal. The ladies were shocked, understanding nothing. Aileen reminded them that, however forgetful they were still part of royalty, and offending members of the royal family is treason. So, if they didn't want to lose their heads, they should leave. The children were stunned, but Evan still distrusted the situation. Aileen knelt before the princes and apologized for the rudeness of her subordinates. She knew the children needed protectors, because if she left the palace, this would happen again. That's why the protagonist decided to transform into the nanny the princes needed. So, if she, as their protector, makes them good people, they won't have a chance to become villains. And then Aileen won't die at the hands of unloved children, and she begged for a chance for forgiveness. And after all, the protagonist could relax, meet a heartthrob, eat well, and live happily ever after. Meanwhile, at Reuben's palace, a somber pagoda hosted a banquet. The butler faithfully watched over his master, waiting to carry out any order at any second. The butler asked his master if he liked today's food, but after eating only a small bite, he put down his fork on the table and asked for beans to be brought to him. The subordinate wanted to object, but not daring to go against his master's will, he went to fulfill the order. The butler couldn't understand what was wrong with such an exquisite steak. But his master was sure that the taste of beans was incomparable to anything in this world. The next day, the king, without consulting anyone, decided to go somewhere. His assistant, worried about His Highness, suggested accompanying him anyway, but the master declared he would go alone, as he could handle the tower himself. And now, let's return to the residence of the crown princes, where Aileen lived. A whole month has passed since the protagonist arrived in this world. At this time, she is striving to adapt as quickly as possible to her life as a nanny. Aileen's schedule has become such that she wakes up early to prepare breakfast for the children. Then she supervises the crown princes while they play and cleans the palace. At lunchtime, the protagonist cooks the meal, and after eating, she continues cleaning. After preparing dinner, she puts the children to bed by reading them stories. During this time, she discovered that housewives are incredible beings. Aileen's room shone with a luxury and richness that surpassed that of the princes. Inside, there was a chest full of jewels and precious ornaments. Every time she passes by, the protagonist confirms that the body's former owner was a villain. But the nanny doesn't visit this room to take advantage of the jewels, but to look for a box with necessities. For a cleaning fanatic, Aileen couldn't understand how everything could have happened to converge into this. Every day, the protagonist wakes up in the middle of an empty hypermarket. During this time, she has gotten along very well with a little ball of fur named Haengi. She also understood that she could only take one thing, and only items that fit in her hand were allowed. While the protagonist was taking the spray bottle with window cleaner, a girl called her by surprise. It was a cheerful maid, who came to report that she had finished cleaning the windows of the East Wing. Her name was Emma, and she was a new subordinate in the cold palace. The girl constantly marveled at the nanny's tools. The protagonist found her assistant in the palace's personnel department. At first she looked pale, but now she is healthier. Together they brought the castle's cleanliness to a level of insane shine and neatness. While both girls were discussing cleaning products, one of the princes ran towards them. Aileen asked if it had been fun playing Louis, to which he happily replied yes. The prince sweetly declared that, with his tree-climbing skills, he would soon get some apples for the nanny. The young lady admired the beauty of the prince's hair, which symbolized their belonging to royalty. Evan also ran over to show off to Aileen, but he was a little annoyed that they hadn't noticed him right away. Seeing him, the protagonist asked if he had been there long and what he wanted. But the prince turned and fled, and the nanny only thought about changing fried eggs to sunny side up for breakfast. Emma asked worriedly if it was a bit difficult to communicate with Prince Evan, but the young lady understood that the child was very good, just shy, and remembered that in the novel everything went well until the children lived with the protagonist. Because in the novel, the real start happened when Kashar appeared. He was a former crown prince who had been overthrown from the throne due to his madness. The novel's protagonist saved the crown prince by eliminating the side effect of the medicine and curing him of madness. The twins and Kashar united, and then decided to get Elsia out of the temple. They decided to fight for her against all odds to take her with them. This was the main conflict of the novel, which could now change. While cooking, the protagonist understood that adding a male character to the mix would result in a chaotic story. Although she wanted to prepare a stew, she finally settled on a new soup. The girl was happy to cook the soup in a special clay pot from the supermarket, but upon sensing a stranger behind her, she immediately hit him with the pot. Aileen assumed it was a thief who had snuck in through the back door. The lady wasn't expecting anyone, as she got up early to eat. But the thief was emitting a strange light. Looking at the man she had just knocked out, the maid was shocked. In front of her lay a blonde man with beautiful and refined facial features. Amazed by his appearance, the nanny couldn't believe it. She had never seen such a work of art. Calming down, she realized that with such an appearance, this man could not be a stranger. Thinking about it, Aileen remembered that there are no blondes in the Richard Empire, apart from the royal family. There is only one conceited hero of the novel, who is blonde with red eyes, Duke Kachar. Upon checking his eye color, the protagonist was shocked, as she couldn't believe it. She was worried because in the original story, Kachar suffered from mania, which causes murder and destruction. The emperor does not know it is a curse, so the duke was exiled to the battlefield. To suppress his madness, he ate a poisonous fruit called a lubai. The young lady was embarrassed to hit the patient with a headache with a clay pot, but she also wondered why he was there. Seeing that Kachar was not getting better, the protagonist thought he was dying, and only now did the girl feel panic over the lack of mercy she would receive for her action. Throwing the body onto a supermarket cart, the lady hurried to dispose of it. Aileen hurried. Catcher must not wake up, nor should the sun fully rise. Dragging the body up the mountain, the young lady understood the attack the Duke would think of. It was hard dragging the body, and the sun was relentlessly rising. Anguish consumed her. Ascending the mountain, the protagonist spotted a tall and luxurious tower. It was the tower with the royal emblem. Kashar's mother was imprisoned there. The emperor imprisoned his wife for giving birth to a demented son. Kashar visited her every year. Seeing how close they lived to the tower, Aileen understood the Duke's sudden appearance. But absorbed in her thoughts, the boy woke up and knocked her to the ground. Restraining her and looking at her with fury, Kashar demanded to know who that person was. Trying to speak, the nanny could barely articulate a word, gripped by terror. Hoping for a miracle, the maid asked him if he remembered anything. Aileen confessed that she didn't want to throw him away. She just thought he was a thief. He didn't understand what the girl was saying, but touching her chin, he asked her to open her eyes. Terrified, the protagonist burst into tears, begging to be rescued. Looking at the young lady, Kachar could finally understand what had happened. He was enraged that the lady, after hitting the thief, wanted to dispose of the body. The Duke, clutching his head, said there were 1,000 ways to eliminate evidence. But feeling the grip loosen, Aileen took the opportunity to flee at full speed. Indignant at her attempt to flee, Kachar threatened her with death if she kept running. But Aileen wasn't running away. She just knelt, begging for forgiveness as she had to save the princes. Hearing the protagonist, the Duke suspected that the girl in front of him was a simple maid. Confirming Kachar's suspicions, the young lady no longer wanted to flee or worry about this anymore. Knowing that royal disputes bring trouble, the girl was confident she would stay alive. But the Duke just smiled scornfully and opted to speak with the lady's masters. He asked to be brought before them, but the request sounded lethal, and Sir Kachar drew his sword. The protagonist was terrified, but having no choice, she guided the Duke towards the princes. Upon entering the castle, the Duke wanted to know what she had hit him with. Ashamed of her clumsiness, Aileen timidly pointed a clay flower pot with her finger. She felt uncomfortable, and the young lady became very nervous, not knowing what to do now. She even thought the Duke had come to finish off Evan and Louis. And while the lady tried to figure out how to hit Kachar with the flower pot, one more time to make him lose his memory. The door opened. The newly awakened princes entered and became interested in what was happening. Louis became curious about what unknown person had appeared in front of them. Thinking for a moment, the boy supposed the guy was Aileen's lover. But unwilling to let go of the nanny he already loved, he threatened the stranger not to let her go. The other boy even suggested that perhaps this man was a villain who wanted to kill them. Looking around, Louis saw the broken flower pot and grabbed a large fragment in his hands. The protagonist feared the child would cut his hand, but the prince only wanted to stop the villain. With every second, the outcome of this situation became more difficult and distressing for Aileen. But even despite the bare blade, Louis's bravery did not waver. Aileen knew very well that if Kachar wanted to, he could kill anyone without leaving a trace. Worried about the twins, the protagonist risked a desperate move. Not knowing what would happen, grabbing the Duke's hand, the maid declared that she was this man's partner. Out of fear, the nanny just squeezed his hand tighter and begged Kachar to relax. Louis didn't quite believe it and asked the man if it was true, while Evan silently tried to remove the sharp object from him. The girl apologized for her beloved, who visits her. The young lady wanted to dismiss the Duke immediately, but after the threat, she invited him in. Seating the three of them in the dining room, the protagonist hurried to prepare breakfast. Seated at the table, everyone anxiously awaited what this girl would bring them. Seeing them seated at the same table, the protagonist felt like she was in a comedy. After asking Emma to set the table, the nanny hurried to prepare everything. Approaching her charge, the young lady begged her not to leave the Duke and the princes alone, to which Kachar replied that he heard perfectly and also wished they would hurry up to taste the breakfast. Upon reaching the kitchen, Aileen started beating the fish, lamenting that the man hadn't lost his memory. After doing this for a while, she began to understand why couples beat fish during fights. Those waiting in the dining room maintained a very tense silence, creating a gloomy atmosphere. Louis, waiting for breakfast, was impatient, but he noticed something unusual about the nanny's beloved. The prince, moved by curiosity, decided to find out what had happened to Kachar's head. Smiling, the Duke recounted that someone tried to knock him out and dispose of his body. Surprised, Louis assumed Aileen had hit him. Clenching his hands tightly and smiling maliciously, the Duke nodded at the young prince's words. But before he finished, the protagonist appeared from behind with food and asked when that had happened. Moreover, the nanny said that the bump wouldn't go away because Kachar hadn't eaten yet. And breakfast, they say, is the best medicine. Serving various exotic dishes, the protagonist wished them bon appetit. Louis was immediately happy about the new food, and Evan gave thanks for the meal. The Duke was surprised, as he neither knew nor had seen anything like it before. Eileen said those dishes were from her hometown, and that they should eat quickly while it was hot. The lady remembered that in the novel there was a scene where Kachar ate seafood, so she supposed he would like the fish. After the first spoonful, the Duke's eyes opened with astonishment. The protagonist was very worried and did not know if the man liked the food. Upon hearing that it wasn't bad, the nanny instantly cheered up and wanted to know how not bad it was. Kachar said it was not bad enough to relieve his headache, so she began to feed him with a spoon. After looking at the maid once he finished eating, the man sank into thought for an instant, and then he whispered about how much time had passed since they met. Worried and assuming the Duke was playing games with her, the lady stated that 3 years had passed. Kachar, smiling, proposed to the maid to move to a more serious level in their relationship. The protagonist did not expect this, so she thought the Duke had gone mad. Everyone in the hall froze, waiting to hear what answer Aileen would give the man. Getting up, the Duke commented that, indeed, it was quite an unexpected conversation. Like a blow to the head, she was happy, assuming Kachar was going to leave them, so she felt a brief moment of relief. But the boy knelt and kissed her hand, saying Aileen did a great job with breakfast, and that is why he wanted to thank her and asked her to wait just a little bit, taking the young lady's hand. Kachar declared that he wouldn't have fun at all if she escaped, and that night, the Duke traveled in a carriage to set his new plan in motion. Mikkel Evans traveled alongside him, faithfully following his master in the carriage. Noticing another eccentricity, the subordinate thought the Duke had completely lost his mind. But reflecting, he realized there was nothing unusual about it, as Kachar had always been impulsive. There was a time when a medium-sized country, Vladis, began to form alliances, and over time, gaining strength, it began to show hostility towards the Richard family. Finally, a war began, which originated from an insignificant conflict, and they sent Kachura to war to die as a discarded prince. But Vladis was in a lamentable state. At the age of 15, the Duke awakened the royal family's abilities on the battlefield, but the scholars analyzing the abilities concluded that such monstrous strength could not exist. In just 3 battles, he managed to win the war, after which the people united under the Richard banner. And because of this, Kachar received the title of Vladis. Mikkel couldn't imagine that something like this had happened on the anniversary of the Empress's death. With a smile on his face, at least to awaken some curiosity in his interlocutor, Kachar mentioned that he had met an interesting girl. While the Duke was on his way, he ceaselessly thought about the events of that hectic day. Approaching the prince's castle, he smelled a pleasant aroma, when he hadn't smelled in an eternity. He couldn't understand how the lady dared to knock him out and dispose of him who hadn't even been wounded on the battlefield. Such a girl was simply crazy. At first, as soon as he heard the word cute, he wanted to kill her instantly. A delicious aroma, more than ever, hopelessly intoxicated the Duke. The dish was spicy and tasty, incredibly delicious, and it soothed his pain. Kachar would forgive anything for that, and he noted that the dish was dried fish. He wondered if he could regain his sense of taste by replacing the poison. After thinking about it, Kachar confirmed whether it was true that members of the imperial family lived near the tower. He asked for information about that nanny to be searched, because he was in debt to her and wanted to repay her. Some time had passed since Aileen met Kachar. He sent many different people to meet her, with numerous gifts. The lady was very embarrassed by so much wealth, and decided to find out where it all came from. The protagonist didn't understand what was happening, and why the Duke was showering her like this. The girl was sure that Kachar would leave and forget her. But the next day, the cold palace filled up with gifts. She also met Mikkel, who kindly handed her a letter. In short, it said that if the young lady didn't accept the gifts, they would be killed. The nanny understood that they might demand compensation if they asked for returns, and she would have to give everything up. The ones who were happiest about the large quantity of gifts and the new people were the twin brothers. Aileen was immediately concerned about the children, but the man, on the contrary, happily approached them. It was Chopin Howard's Viscount, who brought gifts for the princes. It was a set of various toys, with a huge castle in the center. Because the lady was worried about having to keep everything safe to return it later, she asked them not to touch anything. Louis was surprised that the nanny forbade him from playing with what they had been gifted. The boy burst into tears. He wanted to play with exactly that toy. Moreover, he said he had behaved very well. Immediately after, the prince used his secret technique of shining eyes. Unable to resist seeing so much beauty, the girl let him play, but begged for moderation and promised to bring a better toy tomorrow. Seeing Louis's tenderness and joy, the maid couldn't help but ask how much that toy cost. Upon learning the price, the nanny quickly calculated that she could live for 2 months with that money. She was shocked, but using what Aileen had stolen earlier, she finally bought the toys. The protagonist planned to return all the gifts to the Duke and asked Emma to help her organize them. Even while her assistant was moving them to the house, the lady couldn't stop worrying about the gifts. Pulling on the nanny's skirt, Evan begged her to pay attention to him. It was the first time in a long time that the prince spoke to the protagonist. Curiosity invaded her. What did he want? But the boy only asked about problems with the Duke. She was amazed that the boy guessed about the man who came. And what was the Duke? The prince explained that he heard it from another maid and from those who brought gifts. Moreover, the only redhead in the imperial family is Kasia. Aelin promised that the Duke would not touch them, but Evan clarified that wasn't what worried him. The boy said she seemed strange to him, and the young lady understood they were worried about her. At those words, Evan crossed his arms and blushed heavily. How cute! Unable to bear seeing so much beauty, the nanny ran to hug the boy. Rubbing his cheeks, the lady declared she was very happy that someone cared about her. Evan noticed it didn't look like they were dating the Duke, and the young lady was about to confirm they weren't dating. But suddenly, she heard the Duke's voice behind her, repeating Aileen's words. And then he was surprised that the young lady feared her beloved so much. The protagonist became curious about what he was doing, but the Duke invited her out with his cold tone. The man in front of her was terribly intimidating, but so handsome that the lady had mixed feelings. But ignoring the lady's reaction, Catcher asked why they had stopped calling him cute. Such behavior scared the protagonist even more, and while she was confused, young Evan offered to speak, but the Duke ignored him and asked him not to interfere, since this was a conversation between adults. After promising they would return soon, the lady and the man headed to the kitchen. The Duke asked why the young lady hadn't worn any of the gifts, but she said they weren't for her. But Kashar explained that the gifts were merely a reward for breakfast, but Aileen only begged for her life. The boy explained that the reward for breakfast was one thing, and compensation for the incident was another. Trying to get away, the nanny declared that in any case, she hadn't received anything. But the Duke just laughed and asked if that was really true. He mentioned that he had seen one of the princes surrounded by toys. Understanding the magnitude of the problem, the lady fell to her knees, regretting not having hidden everything. Kachar, to calm her down, said he wouldn't ask her to pay for anything. He only asked if they had prepared anything for him today. And as soon as the boy said that the kitchen might save her, the nanny immediately cheered up and declared that she would prepare 18 dishes. Touching her hair, the Duke said he liked Aileen's cooking, but that he could offer her something more. Making the protagonist raise her gaze to his crimson eyes, he declared that the girl had interested him, and for that reason, he would like to start their relationship and communication with a date. Aileen was somewhat indignant that the boy in front of her made the lie sound so exciting. After a while, Kashar and the protagonist went on a date. Admiring the streets, the girl was astonished by the number of shops and wealthy people. But absorbed, the young lady didn't look at the ground and stumbled until the Duke caught her. The maid, completely embarrassed, felt her legs trembling as she felt the man's chest. Catcher proposed holding her hand for safety, but the lady worried that people were watching them. The young man took her hand and reassured her, assuring her there was nothing to be ashamed of. As soon as they started walking together, they heard venomous gossip from the aristocrats. The rumor that Vladis had a lover spread like wildfire. A scandal. The protagonist felt terribly uncomfortable due to the gossip echoing everywhere. Some ladies even started looking down on her for stealing their most sought-after bachelor. To escape the stares, the nanny invented that her throat was terribly dry. Why did they hurriedly head to the Golden Eden bar, where a young man greeted them? Eileen immediately demanded the most secluded spot, ideally with curtains and safe from prying eyes. Although the waiter felt uncomfortable, he decided to please his client and led them to the requested table. Observing the cafe, the protagonist noticed that the establishment was identical to a room cafe. The young lady understands that having entered such a place, they are obliged to order something. While the Duke ordered all the popular dishes, the lady was indignant about the local prices. After serving, the waiter hurried to leave them, creating a tense atmosphere of silence. The young lady didn't know if her head was spinning from the fear of death or from her companion's beauty, but she felt terribly uncomfortable. Seeing the protagonist moving nervously, the Duke asked her not to worry. "I don't bite." Those words calmed the maid, but Kachar corrected himself. "I don't bite yet." He repeated that Aileen only interested him, which is why he sent her gifts and invited her out. The girl supposed they were interested in her because of her low birth. But their conversation was interrupted when all the dishes they had ordered were brought to them. The young lady was amazed by the variety of desserts, but then became sad when water was brought to her. The Duke offered her to try his dishes, to which she immediately refused because she didn't have that much money. Laughing, the man declared that she should stop joking and just eat, as he was treating. Such words moved and embarrassed the protagonist, making her heart beat faster. Without further resistance, the lady finally decided to try those desserts. Due to their appetizing appearance, the protagonist had high expectations for all those delicacies. But upon tasting the first bite, the young lady felt that something was wrong with the food. Although it is sweet, and it seems they used expensive ingredients, the flavor is missing something. The lady realized that all those expensive delicacies were worse than puff pastry or a chocolate cake. The Duke also noticed that the young lady didn't like it at all, so he decided to ask the reason. To avoid the situation however possible, Aileen proposed to the guy that he should try it too. The girl brought the fork directly to Kachar's mouth, embarrassing and blushing him. But calming down and resigning himself, he finally tasted from the maid's fork, after which, once again, he demonstrated with his splendid appearance how magnificent it is. But upon waking up, the young lady was sure that it made no sense for such a man to associate with a simple person like her. So putting down the fork, she directly asked, since she didn't really like it. Such an answer clearly surprised Kachar, who thought he had already answered that question. But the Duke just smiled, understanding that the young lady cannot be fooled by simple kindness. And that made him like her even more. He even doubted his performance, as he had tried his best to give his all. Kachar sighed and revealed that he doesn't need anything more than his beloved, since the Empress insists on his marriage. The Duke told that the Empress longs to find a woman who fits his demanding tastes. The protagonist became uneasy at those words, as it could be the very Empress Guayino. Precisely, she was the last villain of the novel, and she managed to get her son to inherit the throne. Originally, this woman planned to get rid of Kachar in the war, but he returned as a great duke. And now, the Empress is looking for a partner for the Duke, in order to constantly spy on him. The protagonist wondered why the Duke was looking for his beloved precisely in that place. Aileen was very aware that, no matter how handsome he was to Silence, this was extremely risky. The girl was distressed by attracting the Empress's attention and the possibility that something might happen to the twins. The Duke, after taking away a female friend, declared that he loved the young lady's food, and that he found her amusing, after which, provocatively, he licked the female friend he had just removed from the lady's face. He also pointed out that everything there was bland, making Aileen's food much better. Later in the afternoon, the protagonist was returned to her cold palace. The young lady didn't understand why she had been silent for so long, only to end up saying that she was now Kachar's beloved. Aileen was irritated that she couldn't get the handsome Duke out of her head. Upon returning to the cold castle, the lady noticed that there were many girls at the entrance. From Emma's face, it was clear she was perplexed and didn't know what to do. Approaching, the protagonist asked who these people gathered at the castle were. One of the ladies, apparently of higher status, expressed her desire to see the princes, and Aileen told her she could speak with her. The aristocrat smiled disdainfully and extended a letter. Then she revealed the reason for her visit. Lady Layman invites the princes to dinner at Alag. Aileen was very surprised, as this crucial event was in the novel, and the maid had forgotten it. The Alag dinner is very special. It is held once a year, and its hostess is Lady Lemon, a high society lady, and a key figure in the empire's restaurant industry. Each family contributes special drinks and delicacies made with secret recipes. In the original novel, the twins were invited to the dinner, but a drunk aristocrat injures Evan with a decorative knife. It was an accident, yes, but done to impress Empress Balino, who despises all members of royalty, except the crown prince. The lady deliberately invited the princes to the dinner and covered up the incident as a fight between the twins. Aileen found it strange, since this event occurred in spring, when the princes turned 8. The girl didn't understand why the invitation arrived 10 months early and couldn't believe the original story was taking a different turn. The protagonist supposed this could have happened because of her encounter with Kashar. That night, the worried heroine watched the prince's sweet sleep. Aileen understood that if she rejected the proposal, they would report the plan's failure to the Empress, while the nanny resolved to protect the defenseless Louis at all costs. And Evan, the Duke, received a new report. It contained all the information found about the protagonist, which Kashar's servants managed to obtain. The report stated that Eileen arrived at the palace at age 12 and became a servant with a strong ambition for power. But despite that, the girl strives to maintain the dignity of the imperial family. That's why the princes follow her. The servant was very nervous, as he knew that his master's reaction could be absolutely unpredictable. The butler stated that no matter how much he thought about Aileen, she generated a lot of suspicion in him. Kashar smiled and said that girl has no idea how she affects his illness. The Duke affirmed that if she eats his cooking, he can last a month without luby fruits. But the servant didn't understand why he wouldn't hire the protagonist as a cook instead of making her his beloved. Kashar explained that this nanny's culinary skills are enough to make her his beloved, since this girl's food brings him memories of his distant childhood, from when his own mother cooked for her only son. Empress Viviana was considered crazy by people when she was alive. She didn't say she loved Kachar and cooked strange food on his birthday, like a green soup. After those words of pity, Viviana never visited him again and claimed she had never given birth to a child. Precisely, Aileen Harlan reminded the Duke of his mother's strange cooking. The boy knew the lady could cure him, but instead of demanding anything, Kachar only watched as she tried to pull away. This bothered him greatly, so he declared that he would catch Aileen before she could even react. The protagonist left the administrative building of the palace, beaming with joy. Today was the long-awaited payday. The young lady wished every day could be this happy. While other servants whispered behind her back, the lady thought about how great it would be to prepare steaks for the princes. But sharpening her hearing, she overheard that a lady planned to meet with Duke Kachar. Hearing this, Aileen wondered if it wasn't that very day when she had agreed to give him an answer. The nanny realized that that guy had invited 2 girls on the same day. This enraged her beyond measure, and gripped by rage, the protagonist crumpled the envelope. She decided to take revenge on that shameless man in such a way that he wouldn't even dare think of escaping. A few days have passed, and Hannah Enders appeared in the rose garden to meet the Duke. The lady declared she was very upset because the boy was very busy, but happy to see him. Kashar recalled that Viscountess Enders was a faithful aide to the Empress, and that's why he wanted to kick her out. But his speech was unexpectedly interrupted by the girl's shout, calling him cute. It turns out a new girl entered this rose garden, one they clearly weren't expecting. The main protagonist, with tears in her eyes and shouting that Kachar betrayed the lady. She approached him, after which she ran and hid in his chest, which left the Duke very perplexed. Everyone observing this scene around them was in a state of shock. Aileen, raising her gaze to him, asked if their 3-year romance would end right there. And she also clarified if all the tender words he whispered to her were a lie. Seeing the protagonist, the boy noticed her gifts and asked for calm, as the Viscountess was only talking to him. Kashar asked how to prove his truth, and then gently touched Aileen's face, saying she was unique. The people were shocked by such a scene, and Lady Ya Jane felt unwell. The Duke took off his cloak and put it over the girl, promising to stay with her until she calmed down. Therefore, he begged her to forget that girl, the one who looks like a pumpkin. Hearing those words and looking into the boy's eyes, the protagonist began to blush. Because of Kashar's illness, they dethroned him. To calm his madness, the Emperor made a pact with him. He will disappear when the Duke's madness ceases. This contract is like a dog leash. Shortly after, the protagonist and the boy left for the previously agreed location. The Duke praised the lady's appearance, as he was truly very surprised. With her arms crossed, the protagonist declared, somewhat apologetically, that everything was thanks to Emma. After some joking, Kachar decided to find out if Aileen would agree to be his beloved. Even if it was a fake fiancé, the young lady accepted, but with only one condition. She felt uncomfortable, but still asked him to become Louis's guardian. And Evan, the guardianship system, where a powerful or imperial family takes in an orphan child until they reach adulthood. Aileen clearly understood that she couldn't raise the children alone. They needed power and protection, precisely what the Duke possessed, and that's why the lady understood she would hardly have another chance. Kashar immediately understood that she sought to protect them from the Empress, and therefore agreed. But in return, he made it a condition that the protagonist cook personally for him. The young lady felt very uncomfortable and wanted to know until when she would be obliged to do so. The Duke declared that this would last until he himself changed his mind. The girl understood that she could start cooking horrible food at any moment, making the boy reject her. Weighing everything, Aileen fully accepted and asked them to sign a contract. After the bell rang, the butler appeared immediately, and Kashart ordered a notarized contract to be drafted. In just a couple of minutes, the servant provided them with the necessary documents. It was also written there that when they needed to separate, they would part ways calmly. The condition for separation was that one of them found their true love. Hearing that, the Duke fell silent and began to reflect for a long time on something. Aileen wanted to prevent Kashar from falling in love with the protagonist of this novel to protect the princes, because in the original novel, Elsia and the hero Michael end up together. The Duke unleashes a brutal war that devastates the entire continent. If everything continues like this, Aileen doesn't even dare to imagine what will happen to the princes. Seeing that Kashar was not rushing to speak, the young lady asked him if he wanted to add conditions. But instead, the Duke, with a languid sigh, signed the contract and swore to keep it. Upon finishing, they hurried out, as each had important business to attend to. Extending her hand, the lady said she hoped they would work well together in the future. But instead of the expected handshake, the Duke unexpectedly took her hand and kissed her. Faced with such an act, Aileen felt very embarrassed, and all the passers-by focused on them. Afterward, approaching, Kachar declared his request for the lady to take care of him. That very night, a maid in the Empress's castle begged for mercy. But Hueno didn't care. It only bothered her that the maid was howling like an animal from the beatings. While continuing to beat the servant, the Empress was furious that Kachar dared to mock her like that, because a little earlier, the Emperor had reprimanded her for imposing his wife on the Duke. He also told her that the Empress was sending him new girls when he already had a beloved. And that is why the Emperor wanted to know why his wife dared to act that way. In the palace, there began to be much talk about the Duke's beloved, for whom the Empress was ridiculed. The nanny taking care of the princes began to be compared to an angel. The Empress would not forget Aileen Harlan, the one who dealt such a hard blow to her pride. Calmer now, Ueno began to think about the reasons Kachar got involved with the servant. So, drinking wine and looking out the window, she remembered the former Empress. Vivian. Madame vividly remembered how the Emperor sincerely loved Kachar's beautiful mother. But that only lasted until Vivian completely lost her mind. Noticing a golden opportunity, Ueno decided to seize it and execute her plan. She tried to assassinate Kachar and blame Vivian, but the spell went wrong and the boy went mad. Although the Duke's removal as Crown Prince reassured her, she still felt uneasy. Ueno also couldn't understand how he managed not to lose his sanity completely, and suspected the maid was hiding something. Valino also recalled that Marquise Tuberos had invited the abandoned princes to a party in Alag. This made the Empress hatch a new plan and happily break a glass, anticipating her revenge. The maids worried about their highness, who might hurt herself on the glass shards, but she paid no attention. She only asked for a pen and paper, as she wanted to see that upstart face to face. Afterward, the maids announced that Crown Prince Valentine and 7th Prince Michael requested an audience. The lady agreed to receive them and went to the hall, where her worried son was already waiting for her. As soon as the Empress entered, Valentides immediately stood up, truly distressed for her. He had heard that his mother was not feeling well, but stated he didn't believe a word of those rumors. Happy about her son's concern and defense, the lady decided to find out what the 7th prince was doing there. It turned out he had also come, driven by great concern for his mother. The Empress did not appreciate it, and ordered him to stop talking nonsense and better help the crown prince. Guai did not hate him that much because upon giving birth to him, she lost her beauty and the emperor began to avoid her. And also because he didn't have the power expected of a member of the imperial family. The lady called him a useless piece of junk and left to have tea with her eldest son. Valentid scornfully watched his younger brother, showing off his superiority. A whole week has passed since those heated events that high society was gossiping about. Emma didn't understand what the nanny was doing, looking out the window with that strange device. The protagonist explained that she was just waiting for something, and upon continuing to look, she suddenly shouted. After warning that she would leave the palace for a moment, Eileen ran towards the Duke's carriage. The lady cheerfully greeted Kachar and declared she missed him, but her gaze fixed on the document in his hands. The maid tried to snatch it several times, but failed, which infuriated the young lady, who took a misstep and fell onto the Duke. The protagonist felt embarrassed for ending up right on Kachar's chest. Hugging Aileen, the boy said that if she wanted a hug, she only had to ask. The girl still hadn't gotten used to dealing with such a handsome man, and decided to simply enjoy the moment before passers-by started paying attention to them. The young lady wanted to stop out of shame, but the Duke, waving the document, said there was no point in being ashamed, as they were a couple now. After noticing that Kachar is more biting in person than in the novel, the lady took out the document in anticipation. In that document, it was declared that the Duke committed to being Louis Richard's guardian, and Evan Richard until their age of majority. Upon seeing the Emperor's seal, tears of happiness sprang to the nanny's eyes, because the children's days of unrest were coming to an end. Finally, those adorable children will be able to grow up and develop in peace. Eileen thanked the Duke, as she assumed getting that document hadn't been an easy task. Noticing that reaction, the boy smiled and said that if she liked it so much, he wanted the young lady to hear his request. Due to her good mood, the lady didn't think about anything and said she would do whatever it took. Upon hearing it, Kazar declared that he wanted them to live together. The protagonist initially agreed to live in the Duke's castle, but then realized what she had said. Kazar affirmed that he never liked that, and that it saddened him to see her living with the princes in a cold castle. The boy smiled upon seeing the gossips, fascinated by the news, running to tell everyone. Immediately after, the Duke clarified that his proposal was serious. The prince's safety was at stake. The protagonist agreed to talk to the princes, provided that Kachar went to the party at Aloj. The girl knew she could use her beloved as an excuse and reject the offer, but that would greatly complicate the prince's entry into high society before they came of age. And it was there, in front of everyone, that she announced that Kachar was the guardian of the children. The boy interpreted it as an invitation to a date and suddenly approached Aileen. Approaching her lips, he gently reached her ears and whispered that he would try to make time. But for such a favor, the protagonist would have to pay the Duke. Between bewilderment and the idea of being kissed, the young lady blushed and pushed her partner away. Kachar asked if the maid had never kissed, to which she started gesturing and swearing that she had done it lots of times. After laughing at the adorable protagonist, the boy said he would look forward to it and got into the carriage. That night, the nanny was walking through the corridors when an euphoric Louis ran toward her. Jumping into her arms, the boy boasted that he had already washed up and was now a real adult. Sitting on her lap, the maid asked if the prince regretted going to the party in another castle. The protagonist couldn't help but worry about what might happen there. But she knew she wanted to protect those children. The lady was sure of one thing, and that was that unlike the original, everything would be different. Remembering something, Eileen asked if Louis liked living there, to which he replied yes, of course, because they once lived there with their mom. Taking the girl's hand, the prince wanted to take her somewhere and show her something. After taking the protagonist to his room, Louis began rummaging through one of the dresser drawers. Then, happily, he pulled out the grape juice their mother used to prepare for them. Although it can no longer be drunk, Evan and he still keep it. Aileen was moved and happy, as she understood that showing him such a treasure meant trust. Louis added that he remembered his mother's words to always survive intensely, and if they listened to her, then one day love would return to them. The boy was glad his mother was right, because in the end Eileen loved him. Now the lady understood that, wrongly, she considered this childish place hateful. At least this house is full of memories of their late mother. But that atmosphere was interrupted by Evan. He declared that his mother was wrong, which disconcerted Louis and the nanny. The young man repeated that, no matter how hard his brother tried, nothing would change. Clutching Louis close, the boy furiously declared that the nanny wanted to hand them over to someone else. They ordered her to leave the room, or else they threatened to leave themselves. The lady understood that Evan had overheard her conversation with the Duke and had misinterpreted it. The nanny complied with the order, as she feared for the children who might be wandering in the night. Worried and moved, upon saying goodbye to the princes, The young lady wished them sweet dreams. Back in her room and after changing, Aileen sat in front of the mirror with the bottle she had been gifted. The protagonist was very distressed, as she hadn't expected Evan to take it like that, since she thought she could convince him about the move and custody, but she didn't think such a misunderstanding would arise. However, considering that the Empress even sent her an invitation, Kachar was indispensable to protect the princes. Thinking she had rushed her actions, Aileen fell asleep in bed and, as always, she appeared in the supermarket. As soon as the girl appeared, a white, fluffy creature ran out from the corner. The protagonist was happy to see Balash and hurried to pet him. Aileen thought that if they went to the party in Aloj, they should prepare something for the auction, since the charity auction was the highlight of the party. Nobles auction off food, alcohol, or special items representing their families. In the novel, Aileen sold the prince's grape juice, which was bought for a pittance, and poured out before her eyes. The girl noticed that in this world all desserts were horrible, and her chocolate would win. But many guests would be people of the Empress. While the protagonist was actively reflecting, Balash unexpectedly escaped the girl's hands and ran somewhere, which made the lady worry a little. The young lady followed him, as her furry friend had never done anything without a reason. Seeing where Belita led her, Aileen was happy and scolded herself for not thinking of it sooner, which filled her with so much joy that she actively pampered her beloved puppy again. The young lady decided to take this item to the auction and buy something for the children tomorrow. Aileen said goodbye to Belita until the next day, took what she wanted, and returned to her world. But just as the girl disappeared, a long-haired man came out from the corner and called the furry one. He immediately ran into his arms, showing that they also knew each other very well. And so the days passed in preparation, until the day came when the Aloj party would begin. The protagonist wore a luxurious green dress, and the princes wore blue outfits, and light blue. Although the hostess of the banquet is the Marchioness, for some reason the party is held in the Empress's banquet hall. The lady felt like prey for beasts. The feeling was as if they were on enemy territory. Louis, pulling the nanny's dress, asked her if she thought he was handsome. The boy was very happy with the nice clothes, but a disgruntled Evan pointed out who had sent them. Aileen clarified that the clothes were not gifted by her, but by the same person who gave them the toys. The boy remembered and asked if he was the protagonist's beloved. It turned out that Louis did not answer his brother's question, but pointed to the Duke behind the young lady. He was amazed by the girl's beauty, although he himself was extremely handsome and elegant. Aileen couldn't believe the boy was wearing a suit today, nor did she understand why he changed so much when he saw her. The girl apologized to the princes for not having informed them beforehand that Kachar would be with them. But Louis didn't object, as a companion is needed at the party, and if he were taller, he himself would gladly accompany her. The Duke called the boy brat, to which he replied that he was almost a teenager now, and after he becomes an adult, he will marry Aileen. Because the man was in this matter, he declared that marriage is between lovers, not between a nanny and her ward. Louis was unmoved and said there was nothing wrong with that, as adults say that dating doesn't mean marrying. Gently taking the boy's cheeks, Catcher said the boy was talking trash about false love, but that only concerned her, not sincere love. After that, he turned his attention to the protagonist and asked if he was right in saying that those who love sincerely stay until the end. The young lady hesitated, which caused her to see the Duke's murderous glare, so she had to agree. And in this already uncomfortable atmosphere, Evan burst in with his declaration that words are false. The protagonist didn't know what to say and was shocked by his coldness. Unlike his brother, Evan looked at the lady with extreme distrust and anger. Aileen didn't know if she should tell the children everything to get rid of the misunderstanding, but then she would have to confess her knowledge of the future. But the Duke interrupted their conversation by declaring that they only have to wait, and they will see everything. In the original novel, Catcher unleashed a continental war for the heroine, a massacre where children died. To protect the boys and end this love farce, the girl wanted to find the Duke a new beloved. After meeting in one place and hearing the announcement, they all entered the hall together. The nobility was in shock. Now they confirmed the truth of the rumors. They shamelessly commented on how the prince's nanny had charmed Catcher, and the prince's luck. The protagonist felt terrible and wanted to cover the children's ears. But her thoughts were interrupted by a boy with an unexpected proposal. Kill them, pointing at a lady resembling a hippopotamus, and also a woman who resembled a goose. Then he added that they could also kill that pig and the goat standing next to them. because animals that dared to speak like that about his beloved would pay dearly. And while the protagonist convinced the Duke not to carry out a useless massacre, she felt someone pulling her skirt. It was Louis, who was asking permission to play with his brother. It turns out there were many children at the party who had come with their parents. The girl understood that the twins needed friends their age, and that's why she asked Emma to arrange the preparation. The children didn't understand what kind of boxes the nanny had given them, and that they contained something wrapped. The protagonist explained that there were treats in front of them and proposed sharing them with the other children. The little ones were a bit embarrassed by such attention, and Louis declared that he would do so. Furthermore, Aileen asked them to notify her immediately if anyone dared to offend them. Seeing Evan constantly looking back and trying to stop, the young lady decided they wanted to talk to her. But her thoughts were interrupted by the announcement of Empress Guayino's arrival. That woman wore a purple dress and looked threateningly at the hall. As soon as the Empress came down the stairs, another lady hurried towards her. Bowing, she declared that it was a great honor to celebrate the Aloyu festival again in the Imperial Hall. Guayino responded to Marquise Tuberos, who had been eagerly awaiting this day. And she also decided to tell her something, so she began to get closer. After whispering in both ladies' faces, intriguing expressions were visible at first glance. Aileen immediately felt that they were laughing and also looking at her. After that, as if nothing had happened, the Marchioness hurried to approach Aileen. The lady laughed and said she was grateful for the protagonist's arrival, as she was now the main topic of conversation. And she also asked what Vladis was doing there. Seeing the young lady's discomfort, the Duke hugged her and said he couldn't send his fragile beloved alone to such a dangerous place. So he bought an invitation for the gentleman. To humiliate the maid, the Marchioness inquired if she had brought the item for the auction. But the lady was not intimidated and pointed to the place where her gift had been delivered for the event. It was quite large and covered with a cloth, which caused the madame concern. The girl understood they wanted to embarrass her, but they wouldn't succeed, so she hurried to show it. It turned out that, under the white tablecloth, there were bottles with a very special drink. Everyone's attention focused on this rarity, as no one could understand what it was. Taking a bottle in her hands, Aileen explained that it was a traditional liquor from a country surrounded by the sea on 3 of its sides. Macaulay also said it was prepared with fermented grain, which caused the guests to start whispering actively. Some, dissatisfied, started to doubt if it really was alcohol, and they even thought Aileen had brought a cheap drink to the auction. The Marchioness mocked, saying that in a place of noble products, there was no room for something untested. But the protagonist didn't care and announced a tasting to silence them. Aileen encouraged people to try it, but everyone looked at the Empress. A girl said no one would drink that only wine was real alcohol. But before they finished, a crash shook the banquet hall. It was the Duke. He had smashed a statue and demanded absolute silence. She worried about the sapphire statue, but Kashar promised to compensate for it. After his theatrical outburst, the Duke asked Aileen for a glass. She shook the drink, served it carefully, and offered it to her beloved. He took it and drank a couple of sips to savor that rarity to the fullest. Everyone knew Kachar's rigor, so everyone showed restraint. And to their surprise, he liked it. After that, a green-haired girl appeared from behind, who also wished to try the drink. Noticing her unusual appearance, the young lady understood she was foreign, and an instant later, she remembered that in front of her was Frisia the Aksha, the princess, the second daughter of King Aksha, who owns the magic tower. Although she worked as a professor at the academy, she was actually the leader of Elvatoria, and she could get whatever she wanted. She was beautiful, intelligent, and talented, and she also didn't worry about the Empress's opinion. So that the Duke wouldn't start a continental war, he needed a girl. So the lady thought she had found the ideal match. Bringing the cup with the drink closer, the princess said she really liked its aroma. After that, all the aristocrats began to stare at her. But suddenly, the Aksha dropped the cup and stopped responding. The protagonist wanted to approach immediately to find out what was happening. The princess covered her mouth with her hand, which caused instant gossiping. The man exchanged a look with the Empress, and after her approval, accused Ailina of poisoning. The individual accused the lady of murder, as it was a crime of diplomatic scale. And that is why he declared that the protagonist must be arrested immediately. The Empress, smiling maliciously at the faith, gave the order for arrest. The girl was terrified, as the guard raised their swords and approached. But the princess interrupted all the commotion, speaking of the soft taste that remained on the tip of her tongue. The drink was very refreshing, with a subtle aroma of grain and also slightly sweet. The Aksha declared that wine was no match for it and asked if she could participate in the auction. The Marchioness, hearing such words, felt uncomfortable and didn't understand what was happening. The woman, before answering, looked at the Empress, noticing her enraged face, and then denied the request. The princess became sad, having to give up the divine wine after those words. The aristocrats rushed to try it. The protagonist was surprised by such an avalanche, but composing herself, she asked them to queue up. Everyone who tasted a little felt extremely encouraged and admired by the grain drink. The young lady asked if it was enough to participate. Regretfully, she had to accept the fact that she must allow the drink to participate in the auction. After that, the Marchioness hurried to reach and calm the Empress. Discussions about the amazing taste of the liquor did not cease throughout the hall. And at that moment, Kayana Andres approached her, the same one who fainted in the rose garden. The girl decreed that whatever she did, Aileen would never beat the Ender's ruby wine. The lady was astonished. That was the drink with which that family had been winning the auction for 4 years. Aileen became curious to know what it was like, as she hadn't had the chance to try the local liquor yet. Seeing no reaction, Hayana became indignant. They were completely ignoring her. The protagonist noticed that, out of rage, Enders was biting her lip, so she approached and gently touched her face. Looking closely at her, the lady warned her that if she kept biting her lips like that, she would soon start bleeding. Eileen also said she would like to try the ruby wine. If it had won for 4 years, its taste must be excellent. Gianna felt very embarrassed by such closeness, but confirmed the excellence of the wine, while the protagonist began to worry because Enders had a fever and had blushed. Catcher approached unexpectedly. The Duke clarified that he approached before his beloved cheated on him and taking advantage of the moment, and Yeana hurried to flee. The boy said he was sad to know so little about her, but the young lady just laughed. It was natural. They were strangers. Approaching Aileen, Kashar commented that hearing that was too much. They were supposed to be lovers. To avoid trauma, the Duke asked for comfort, so Aileen agreed to go to a secluded place. Once on the terrace, the protagonist revealed that she had prepared something for the Duke. Immediately after, she took out a small box and a bottle of his liquor. In the box was a potato pancake with cheese and bacon, the perfect combination with macchioli. It turns out the young lady kept the food in a magic lunchbox that was in Aileen's room. Thanks to that, even the cheese remained perfect. But the Duke was somewhat perplexed by such comfort. The protagonist remembered that he asked her to cook for him. It was even in the contract. And this dish was special for Kachar. After giving him a piece, the lady hurried to serve the liquor so that the salty taste and greasy wouldn't disappear from his mouth. Afterward, she proposed a toast to their successful relationship. After eating everything, Eileen tried to guess if he liked the food. Although he wasn't used to chopsticks, he ate well. Kashar commented that it was extremely delicious, crispy on the outside, spicy and salty on the inside. The protagonist noted the good appraisal of her food and said she loved compliments. Serving another round, the Duke asked Aileen if she was afraid of him. The young lady replied that of course, she was afraid. But since he was handsome, he couldn't be bad. The Duke didn't understand the connection, only observing his beloved's happy face. Since they had already drunk everything, the protagonist suggested returning to the hall. But just before leaving, Kachar grabbed the girl, preventing her from leaving. The boy asked why she wasn't comforting him, and he was already about to kiss her when suddenly Aileen began to touch his forehead. Noticing it, the lady asked about the headache, and the boy asked if he looked sick. The girl hesitated about whether someone who takes poison could drink, but unable to say it. She spoke of the commonality of headaches. She was simply worried that he was in pain, and in the novel only Elsia could cure him. In any case, Kachar will have to meet his savior at least once. And furthermore, the young lady wondered if there were other ways to help the boy. Her uncomfortable silence was interrupted by Sir Migel, asking the Duke to step out for a moment. The Duke's retainer looked at the protagonist with suspicion and confusion. Looking at his face, the girl thought the man's expression had darkened. Eileen decided to go see the children when Emma hurried to approach. From her worried appearance, it was obvious that something had happened in her absence. It turns out that the heir of the Eppleton family and the princes got into a conflict. The foot of an unknown boy was on the gift given by the princes. He claimed that the princes had no father because they live alone in a cold palace, and their guardian is the Duke. The protagonist hurried to reach the children as quickly as possible, but she encountered a scene where Evan was brutally beating the boy. Aileen tried to calm him somehow, while the Eppleton heir threatened to tell his father everything. At one point, the mother of the beaten Giovanni also noticed the scene. Immediately, they began to accuse Aileen of having taught the children to fight. The girl declared that the Eppleton heir had insulted her princes, which caused enormous anger in the nanny. But for them, that was no reason to hit their son. The empress saw a great opportunity and declared that the young princes were not to blame. Immediately after, with a malicious smile, she asked the Marchioness for her opinion on the matter. The protagonist became alert immediately, sensing great danger was approaching. Madame said that the twins are very young, and the blame lies with the one closest to them. Aileen knew it was all a plan, but without giving up, she said that Louis and Evan are also royalty, and to deny it is to offend the imperial family. Frightened, Giovanni's father declared that it was just an insignificant childhood quarrel. The empress mockingly defended the count's son. Furthermore, she accused Evan of trying to hit him. The Eppletons were instantly encouraged, feeling protected, and demanded a good punishment. Huelina said that although Duke Vladis is their guardian, the blame largely falls on their nanny. Terrified and crying, the children hid behind the only person trying to protect them. The empress admitted that, in part, she was to blame for leaving the raising of the princes solely to the nanny. The Marquis supported His Highness and decreed that the one responsible for the education should receive 30 lashes. After these words, a knight appeared in the hall with a smile and a whip. Clearly expecting this, anguish and fear invaded Aileen, but she couldn't abandon the situation. The children depended on her. The boys became so distressed and frightened that sweat began to run down their small bodies. But the protagonist was not intimidated and hurried to order Emma to take the princes away. The woman hesitated, which caused the nanny to raise her voice and order her to comply immediately. Because she was the Duke's beloved, she was allowed not to take off her dress and prepared herself on the table. Anticipating the pain, Aileen wished to flee from there at that moment, but she couldn't. All the blame would fall on the twins. At that moment, she remembered the contract with Cashor, where it was not specified that he would protect her. But they had shared the potato pancake with Magali, so she begged for him to appear. And just as the knight brandished the whip, a red energy severed his hand. Instead of receiving the blow, the warrior's scream and the sound of his hand hitting the ground were heard. The Duke, approaching his beloved, said he did not expect to see blood in the Empress's palace. Immediately after, in a threatening voice, he asked his fiancée to come closer to him. Happy about this, the protagonist ran to hug her beloved amidst tears. The Empress, recovering from the shock, was indignant at such behavior in her palace. While Aileen hugged him, Cachar declared that he punished the insect that tried to harm his future sister-in-law. And he doesn't understand what the problem is. The Empress tried to point out the nanny's mistake, but the Duke said the punishment was not directed at her. And at that moment, with the phrase, "What is this uproar?" Dionysius Sure Rahan Richard entered. All the guests hurried to greet His Majesty, and the girl understood that he was Cashar's father. And the princes. Nervously, the Empress approached her husband and told him it was a great honor that the Emperor attended the Alak party. But Dionysius didn't reply to her at all. He only repeated his question about what was happening there. The Empress said that the young princes were participating in a party for the first time, and a small conflict had arisen. After these words, Dionysius observed his younger sons and saw their frightened faces. He asked the hostess of the party to tell more about the incident, so she, bowing, said that, due to a joke, Count Evan's son started throwing punches. Hearing such a lie, when everyone heard and saw perfectly, but thanks to such information, the Emperor will side with the Empress. The girl, out of helplessness, clenched her hands tightly, because she understood that even if she told the truth, it would sound like a lie. Cachar was very annoyed, so he thought about simply killing them all. But suddenly, a man said that his wife was lying. It was the very drunk Marquis Gerard, who was strutting around the hall. The lady became instantly frightened and uneasy, claiming he was talking nonsense. Seeing the man drinking Macchiali and acting so carelessly, Aileen labeled him crazy. The protagonist overheard that, while they were on the terrace, the secret auction had ended, and the Marquis won it. The court was shocked to see the final valuations of the auction bids, since first place was taken by Evan Richard and Louis Richard with the Majali product at a price of 4,900 golds. The lady was furious and called her husband a deranged monster. The Marquis revealed that his wife promised him he could buy whatever he wanted, as she would be busy intimidating the nanny. Frightened, the Marchioness immediately covered her husband's mouth, preventing him from breathing. Dionysius decided to find out exactly what Marquis Gerald meant. The Empress immediately took him by the hand and begged him not to listen to the ravings of a drunkard. The Emperor declared he wanted to hear the Marquis, who, biting his wife's hand, freed himself. The man pointed at the Count, saying that his wife and the Empress conspired with those pigs to whip the nanny. At such words, the Jeremy family tensed up and became enormously frightened. Therefore, the Emperor decided to issue a decree against Count Appleton and his wife for insulting the imperial family. Halfway through the decree, the pale faces of this family were already visible, worsening with every word. Then, Dionysius continued punishing the guilty parties, and the Lemons couple will be imprisoned for fraud. And the rest of the charges will be seen at trial. Understanding the predicament they were in, the Marchioness tearfully begged the Empress and said, "Doesn't Balina know that all this is a big misunderstanding?" But Her Highness pretended not to have any idea that her friend would act like that. The protagonist couldn't even understand why everything happened this way when Kachar proposed they leave there. After this, Eileen hurried to hug the princes and said, "Let's get out of here as soon as possible." And in the blink of an eye, everyone got into the carriage and set off on the way back. Only upon leaving the castle could the young lady calm down and analyze the situation clearly. The nanny asked if Louis was okay, to which he immediately nodded, grateful for her protection. The girl wanted to know about Evan, but he didn't even deign to turn his head. Louis asked if it was true that his brother had become their guardian. Eileen realized her mistake for not having told him sooner, but nodded and confessed that she herself had asked for that favor. The protagonist admitted that she had requested protection for the young princes. Louis, realizing his powerlessness and that his nanny had to manage for them, broke down crying. Kachar told him it was completely normal for children to be unable to do anything. Louis declared that when he grows up, he will also protect Aileen. And then they snuggled up. Evan interrupted them. Even if they grow up, nothing will change. The abandoned ones cannot protect anyone. The Duke decreed that the younger brother is worse than the older one, and his beloved reprimanded him. Kachar explained that if he rescues the twins, Aileen will keep them. It's strange to cry without defending her. Clenching his small hands furiously, the boy exclaimed that he hated her with all his being. But now Evan is sure. The nanny has become crucial for them. The boy apologized, knowing that the servant protected them, but his powerlessness enraged him. The girl was stunned. So much worry in such a small being, unable to open his heart to Aileen. While the nanny was thinking, Louis hugged her tightly. "You are the person I love most in the world." The Duke sighed and asked if they needed his guardianship, to which the children nodded firmly. The protagonist was stunned. The children agreed to stay quiet. He pulled her towards him, bragging that having two little gentlemen was great. His grip made her blush, and the Duke, mockingly, said he was competing with young men. And so, after a while, they finally arrived at his palace. Before entering, Aileen announced that she would talk to the princes. The heroine dropped the bomb. She had an offer to move to a better place, far from the palace. She explained that it was Kashar's residence, and that with him as their guardian they would be safer. Knowing that their home would remain there and they could return, the little ones accepted the move. Louis then asked, would they all live together like a family? Confirming that yes, they could be. The prince declared, Aileen is mom and Kachar is dad. While the girl explained that this was impossible, since the Duke was like an older brother. He sank into his thoughts. He was infuriated that his audacity grew. How dare he try to hit his beloved while he was with the emperor? Dionysius asked how Kachar had spent the anniversary of his mother's death, who committed suicide after being overthrown and locked in the tower. The Duke understood that, since the emperor always supports Guayino, he tries to ignore that he abandoned Vivian. It was His Highness who, upon learning of the Alaj party, decided to take advantage of being at the Empress's castle to take a look. The boy didn't know why Dionysius accompanied him, but it was good that he was there. Otherwise, he would have cut off his head, not just his hand. He almost exploded, but managed to restrain himself because he had tasted the food prepared by Aileen earlier. But he also feels there is still more, and Kachar started to wonder why he desires to touch her so much. The lady noticed him and said the princes were there, so she hurried to take the boy to the carriage and thanked him for the day. Taking the girl's hand and kissing it, the Duke declared that it would be the first time he would live with someone, and that he couldn't wait for her to move in. After a while, pitiful screams echoed in the night from the dungeon. Wiping his hands, Catchar handed the case of the Eppletons to Mikkel, and the Lemons Marquises will wait, since they are close associates of the Empress. The servant, after listening to his lord, promised to follow his instructions. Then the Duke asked about the progress of Aileen's and the prince's preparations. Upon learning that everything was ready, the young man smiled mockingly, as he was truly expecting them. And he had never been so eager. Exactly 1 week after the party, the young lady arrived at the Duke's castle, and was stunned. But let's go back a bit, to the morning of the moving day in the cold palace. Sir Mikkel arrived to take the princes, and Lady Aileen with Emma. The luggage was sent ahead, so all that remained was for them to arrive. The children didn't sleep all night, waiting for this day. Since it was their first time leaving their lands, not counting the party, the children were excited. Emma imagined the luxurious garden in Reuben Castle, and couldn't believe she would live there, while the protagonist remembered the rumors that it was made of crystal. Upon crossing the barrier protecting the castle, Mikkel warned that it might tremble, but that we shouldn't be afraid. But in the end, the Duke's house turned out to be very different from how it had been described. After inspecting it and being horrified, the lady decided that it was the devil's castle, and she supposed they had taken the wrong direction. But Mikkel corrected, saying they had arrived where they should. The nanny tearfully begged the man to say it wasn't true, but unfortunately it was. At one point, it started to rain, which made the protagonist think that even the sky pitied her. She worried about what would happen to her princes in such a place, while the children were already hurrying to take shelter from the rain. They were greeted by a rather terrifying guy, visibly emaciated and with red eyes. Taking the children in her arms, the young lady immediately began complaining to Mikkel that there was a ghost there. But he explained to her that he was the butler. Taking a candelabra, the boy introduced himself as Baladshu and butler of Reuben Castle. The young lady, seeing his pointed ears and dark skin, recognized him as one of the Maenos who lived in the darkness of Barahan. This worried the young lady, because in the novel the world was divided into 4. The Richard Empire, whose founders were powerful dragons. Also the Holy Rubensia Empire, whose power base is the Temple of Light. The 5 principalities of Surus, which live in harmony with nature and spirits. And Barahan, where the Main live, descendants of demons. Catchar, obsessed with Elsia to start the war, decapitated the Main king. In this way, he conquered all his people and made them his main force. Only the strongest became king, and that was the peak moment of the Duke's development. Emma asked if her companion was even human, to which Aileen replied that he was a Main. The butler was not offended by such a reaction, as it is normal when meeting a Main for the first time. The young lady asked when the impostor, or rather Catchar, would arrive. But Mikkel reported that the Lord would be here tomorrow, and hurried to leave. After this, the palace announced that they should follow him, as he wanted to show the castle. But suddenly, their guide fell to his knees right in front of them, causing great concern. The butler apologized, explaining that he didn't feel well, but would try to show everything. The man said he was fine. He was surprised by the nobility of the princes, but suddenly coughed up blood. At the sight of blood, Emma fainted, but the protagonist couldn't afford that, even though she greatly desired it. Louis, after poking the sick man, declared that he wasn't moving at all, which shocked the nanny. While Eileen scolded him for not poking the sick man, Evan corrected, saying it was better to kill him without a trace. The young lady was surprised to hear those words, but the boy explained that he had heard it from Catchar. And while they were chatting, suddenly, another Main appeared behind the protagonist. Upon turning, the young lady saw a new employee, only this time she was a maid. Passing by, the woman picked up the butler on her shoulder and took him away. The lady introduced herself as the head maid of the castle, Estra, and asked who they were. Since the butler is very ill, the lady said she would give the tour herself. Then, so the guests wouldn't worry, she picked up Emma on her shoulder and promised to take care of her. They were led through a completely dark hallway, without any light. Along the way, the maid cast a spell to cover all the windows. The children were surprised to meet a mage and wanted to learn. But Aileen was worried about why the curtains were closed. The lady explained that magic is a matter of talent, and seeing them, she believed the twins would succeed. Upon arriving at the place, Estra showed them Louis and Evan's new individual rooms. They were shocked, as the rooms were luxurious, and furthermore, they were separate. The protagonist was only comforted that at least the children's rooms looked nice, but she was interested in knowing where her personal room was, to which the head of service replied that she would live on the 3rd floor. After leaving Miss Emma in her room on the bed, the maid and Aileen headed to the 3rd floor. Upon going up, The lady noticed that there were only 2 rooms, and the one on the right was for her. The nanny, grateful for their company, was about to say goodbye when they stopped her. It turns out the Duke asked to relay that Aileen could go to his room at any time of the day or night. As she left, the maid informed her that tomorrow she would introduce the lady to the castle staff and show her the rest of the places. The protagonist, after settling in, went to put the princes to bed. The boy insisted he could sleep alone and that he was very brave. And in just a couple of moments, a sleepy snore was heard, after which the lady kissed him and wished him good night. The young lady asked if Evan would also go to sleep, like his older brother. Aileen warned that if something happened or he needed anything, he should go up to the 3rd floor to her room on the right. The boy asked for a hug for the first time, which surprised the girl. Noticing this, Evan retracted embarrassedly and said he would go to sleep. Touched and happy, the protagonist kissed the prince and wished him good night. After putting the twins to bed, the young lady wandered around the castle looking for the dining room, since her throat was dry. Finally, upon finding the place, Aileen noticed that someone was already there. A certain man was drinking a strange red drink. With a very spooky face, he turned around upon hearing Lady Harlan. Seeing such a horrible scene, she couldn't take it anymore and lost consciousness. Upon waking up and hearing apologies, the protagonist unexpectedly saw Kashur in front of her. She remembered perfectly fainting and thought she was dreaming. The girl hallucinated about her dreams. Those muscles in front of her were super detailed, and the perfect and flawless face of the Duke looked at her with a smile. So handsome. Touched and laughing, she called Kachar her crazy sweetie. What a cute nickname. But suddenly, snap. He grabbed her cheek and started stretching it, calling her a cheater. She was indignant. How dare he try to deceive them into moving to that place? What nerve! She wouldn't forgive him just because the Duke took off his shirt in her dreams. The butler tried to calm her down. The lady was surprised that the butler Drac asked her to let go of the Duke. How strange. Kachar, as if nothing had happened, with flushed cheeks, asked if his beloved had slept well. Realizing what had happened, the young lady jumped backward and greeted the Duke. The boy wanted to understand what the hell was going on, if he had asked them to prepare to meet his beloved. But it turns out that, instead of a human greeting, the servants greeted them in Mayan style. The lady clarified that the garden decoration and the black skulls on the stairs were also her doing. She also explained that for them, the colors black and violet are the most beautiful, and that the fountain water is good for health. It's an infusion. Also, the animal statues popular in Barajan were custom made by an artisan. The Duke clarified that his guests and his beloved are human, and that making the palace habitable was not what he meant. The protagonist also remembered how she fainted upon seeing Dracu, but the boy clarified that the young lady misunderstood him. He wasn't vomiting blood. Taking out a bottle, he explained that it was a special mash, a drink made of crushed plants. The butler explained that he is now a vegetarian, having eaten only meat for a long time. But upon discovering vegetables, his diet changed completely. The man also explained that, if he were in Barahan, that diet wouldn't affect him due to the dark energy. But here there is also rejection. The protagonist said she was very tired and wanted to go to sleep quickly, but Kachar took her hand and put her on the bed, asking where she was going if she was tired, because Aileen is now in her beloved's bedroom. Those words filled the girl with shame and discomfort, causing her to stutter. The butler hurried to leave them alone, creating an uncomfortable silence between them. While the lady admired the Duke's perfect body, a thought of a passionate night flooded her mind. All those thoughts made the protagonist blush even more, and her nose started bleeding. Aileen, panicking, declared it was due to tiredness and not his fiery muscles. The girl felt very uncomfortable with the situation and therefore apologized for her criticism. Kachar told her that his beloved had the authority to change everything to her liking. Holding the boy with both hands, the happy lady said she didn't mind. As Aileen's attention finally gave way, the young lady felt great weakness and fell asleep instantly. The night was calm and nothing happened, so the girl could sleep peacefully. As soon as the protagonist woke up, she shot up and felt tremendous discomfort. She immediately started looking around the room, searching for Kachar, who had left. Calming down, the young lady decided that the first thing was to return to her room as quickly as possible. Remembering last night, the lady recalled that the Duke wanted to ask her something. And right in the middle of her brainstorming, Aileen heard a knock on the door, which scared her a little. Thinking it was Kachar coming to see her, the girl worried a lot about last night, but it turned out to be Echitra, who had come to her room. The head maid reported that she first went to the master's room, but not finding the lady. She came akin. Eileen asked where the Duke was, to which the maid replied that she would probably find him in the training grounds. It turned out that, at that moment, Emma was already taking care of the princes, who had also woken up. Louis reported that he slept well and was only scared when he found himself alone in the room. But that everything was fine. Upon hearing the children's desire to eat, the maid offered to accompany them personally. Surprisingly, the twins were not afraid of the woman, so strong and unknown. Evan took the protagonist's hand and said that Eshatra was a mage, which sparked his great curiosity and interest in magic. Although both twins in the novel became powerful mages, only Evan was able to control it completely. Emma, dejected, apologized for yesterday, as she felt very embarrassed. The nanny tried by all means to calm and encourage her assistant. The kitchen still looked like something out of a horror movie, so the young lady wondered if the food in the dining room would be decent. To her surprise, they brought a wide variety of expensive and delicious dishes. The chef was from the Richard Empire, so they should like the food. The food looked a bit rustic, but the taste was really good. Many servants spied from the doorways, touched and admired by the twins. But everyone came to the same conclusion. Louis and Evan are adorable. After talking about the princes, they focused their attention on the master's beloved. As soon as Aileen noticed them, they hid immediately. It seemed like they were afraid of her. The young lady decided to find out when Kashura would come to breakfast, but Echitra explained that her master barely eats. The protagonist was surprised that the Duke barely ate, if he always devoured everything with her. The children were happy with the food and the amount of treats, in addition to the kindness of the people. But Louis noticed that Aileen was his favorite and her food, the most delicious of all. From such comments, the young lady began to think that, after all, she had not come in vain. Catcher stroked Louis, congratulated him on his good work, and then, happily, approached his beloved. The servants debated whether his feelings were real, but she was worried that no one offered her food. The protagonist decided to ask the Duke if he was going to eat anything. The boy said he only came to see her, but the lady worried that Kashar would lose his perfect muscles. Shouting that it couldn't be like that, Aileen asked if she could use the kitchen for a moment. The girl was instantly happy that it was a normal kitchen, without strange modifications. The head maid introduced the master's beloved, Lady Aileen Harlan. The head chef said it was an honor to meet her, and that his name was Babito. The young lady explained that they liked everything, and she only came because Kachar doesn't eat anything. The cook declared that the master has eaten absolutely nothing for 3 months. After asking for the necessary ingredients, the young lady decided to prepare a hearty meat dish. After a while, the dish was ready and smelled deliciously of meat with roasted vegetables. Upon seeing and smelling the extraordinary dish, everyone present was amazed. Eileen explained that this dish is bulgogi, meat stir-fried with a sweet and sour dressing. The chef tried to recall such a dish, but couldn't, and the smell greatly attracted them. That's why they wished the master would eat his dish, which they had prepared with such care. The lady understood that not only the head maid, but everyone, was worried about the master. Happy and smiling after receiving blessings, the protagonist headed towards Kasha. The Duke was already waiting in the dining room, and the chef personally supervised everything. Gradually, a crowd of servants gathered, observing the scene with amazement. Eileen insisted that the Duke eat well. Now he had to set an example for the children. It was evident, just by his expression, that the food had amazed him with its aroma and appearance, but adopting an indifferent attitude, the young man took the first bite to taste. His face instantly lit up, with a smile and joy that were undeniable. Kasha noticed that his beloved didn't stop surprising him every moment. The Duke exclaimed that he fell in love with that taste again and again upon trying the dish. The children also wanted to try the protagonist's new dish. What fascinated Louis most about the food was that the meat was very soft and sweet. Evan was more impressed by the pleasant combination of salty and sweet. Kachar declared that it was so delicious that it was even invaluable. But the most astonished were the servants, since the master ate everything. The servants began to idolize her, as they believed the future mistress had worked a miracle. They also said that it was the first time the master had tasted anything, which greatly surprised Aileen. The entire cheerful atmosphere was interrupted by Kachar's threatening voice, ordering them to stop. Since the children finished eating, he proposed playing in his room. After that, the Duke hurriedly left the dining room and went in an unknown direction. The girl didn't understand what was happening, but the butler decided to tell her what she should know. That same night, the protagonist in her room was full of thoughts. The protagonist was upset because Kachar had lost his sense of taste. The servant said that, at some point, the master stopped feeling the taste. And that's why he doesn't eat. Why then does he say his food is delicious and even describe its taste? What is special about it? The lady tried to understand. She also remembered the condition that she had to cook for him. And the young lady did not understand why she was so sad. And while the girl was actively thinking, she heard a knock on her room door. The young lady feared it was the children or etc., but it turned out to be Kachar who had come. The girl, averting her gaze in shame, asked if something had happened. It turned out that the Duke, who had come to see her so late, wanted to invite the young lady on a date. And after apologizing for stealing her precious time, he descended the stairs with her. Aileen was curious to know where they were going, and Kachar explained that it was the most normal place in the castle. The girl grumbled a bit, as she believed there were no decent rooms left, except for hers, and the twins, until the boy opened the doors before her. Before her appeared a place planted completely with moon-pierce flowers. The boy was surprised that the lady knew those flowers, but the young lady explained that she had only heard their name. The protagonist knew that those flowers were Viviana's favorites before she lost her sanity. The entire palace was covered in moon-pierce, and perhaps that influenced Kachar. One of the particularities of these flowers is that during the day only the buds are visible, and they open at night. Aileen loved the beauty of these flowers and decided to confirm if they had brought her there just to show them to her. The protagonist wanted to ask him if it was true that the Duke could not taste at all. The girl truly hoped the boy wasn't lying when praising her food, but she heard that he had no sense of taste. Disappointed, looking away, Aileen sighed and said they had always lied to her. But the Duke gently took her hand and told her that he did feel the taste of her food completely. The lady took it as another lie, but Kachar explained that he himself didn't understand why. But he only felt the taste of her food. To make them truly believe him, the boy decided to take an oath on his mark, after which he took off his jacket, turned his back, and pulled down his shirt to show it. The girl was shocked and excited, as she immediately recognized it, because that same mark was the oath of truth sealed by the emperor himself. Kachar told her about his suffering with the mania, and that to maintain sanity. He takes poison. The girl felt discomfort and fear, as she understood what he meant by the fences to Luby. The poison was from the mainlands, although thanks to it, the Duke keeps his sanity. Over time, it dulls his senses, including the 5 basic senses, those that allow them to fully feel life. Aileen knew that a Luby caused headaches, but she understood their origin, and how they stole the 5 basic senses. Bowing before the lady, Kasha declared that he was totally serious and felt safer by her side. Suddenly, the protagonist was flooded by a storm of emotions and hugged the boy. The lady burst into tears upon understanding how hard it had been for him, as he only tasted blood and rot, so she promised to help him. Aileen supposed that if he could taste her food, maybe it would be easier for him in the future. Even if she couldn't lift the curse, with tears in her eyes, the protagonist desperately wished to help him and make his life easier. The Duke looked at the teary eyes of the lady before him, and his heart beat strongly. Feeling strong emotions and confusion, the girl picked up Kasha's clothes and, using the cold as an excuse, she said she was going to her quarters. The boy asked surprisedly if the young lady didn't like him getting undressed, but Aileen's embarrassment overwhelmed her, so she immediately asked him to get dressed, as he might catch a cold. Seeing the protagonist all red in front of him, Kasha smiled and agreed to return. The girl wished the dark night would hide her face, and for that reason, she didn't say a word until they reached her room. The young lady was about to enter her room and wish him good night, when the Duke asked why she was going there. Aileen didn't understand what was happening, as it was her room, but the boy declared that they had decided to sleep together starting today. It turns out that's what Kachar asked the night before, to which the young lady had unconsciously agreed. The Duke, embarrassed, said he perfectly understood that sleeping together in a contract relationship was unpleasant for her, but he also said he was very sorry, as he felt his headache eased when Aileen was near. Faced with such a pretext, the girl's resistance weakened greatly, and she finally agreed, on the condition of staying with him until he fell asleep. Kachar looked at his sleeping beloved, perplexed, since she said she would only stay until he fell asleep. Touching Aileen, the boy wondered if, by not falling asleep, she would stay with him forever. Thus passed an absolutely carefree night for the protagonist. But upon waking up in the palace, there were already many rumors. All the servants watched her attentively and criticized her in a low voice. While walking down the hall, the girl noticed that the butlers seemed to avoid her for some reason. Eileen grew more and more curious about the situation and was therefore happy to finally find the head maid. The protagonist decided to ask about the whereabouts of the butler Draku. Ashita asked why the lady was looking for him, to which she only received a mocking smile, and the phrase that she wanted to give him something. Upon entering the room where Draku was, the young lady found him drinking a vegetable juice. The man was fascinated by its taste, and Aileen was happy to have finally found him. With a cunning look, Aileen revealed that she wanted to give him something. He was very surprised, and the lady just made sure that he liked the spicy vegetarian food. Rummaging in her bag, the young lady took out and offered him a strange little box. Draku did not understand what they were giving him, but laughing, the young lady said that although vegetables are good, they are not for his organism. That's why she decided to offer him this as a substitute for meat, and if he likes it, Eileen will tell him how to prepare it. Grateful for the attention, the butler hurried to taste the rarity, and the young lady was tense. After a short pause, Draco confessed to being stunned by how delicious it was. It was the first time he had tasted anything so tasty, and he was immensely grateful, but he hesitated whether he could accept something so valuable. The ecstatic butler was willing to do anything for the lady. Hearing this, Aileen smiled maliciously. Immediately after, she decided to ask him for help and together change the castle. The protagonist explained that the princes are very young, and it will be difficult for them to adapt to society upon returning to the imperial palace. After thinking about it, Draco agreed and decided to ask what exactly needed to be changed. Happy to have reached an agreement with the butler, they went to see Kachar to talk to him. On the way, while descending from the upper floors, the protagonist asked how the butler arrived at Richard. Aileen complained that, despite their relationship, she knew very little about Kachar. The boy smiled and said that the Mainas have served the Duke even before this palace was built. The young lady supposed they knew each other before her beloved obtained this position, and she conjectured that they met in the war. Draco confirmed the lady's assumption and explained that they were mercenaries for friendly countries. Levon, one of Vladis's allies, is located not far from Barahan. It was there that they first met, but only as enemies. Despite Kashar's cruelty and unleashed power, the Mainas did not dare to oppose him. Draku recounted that they were amazed by the Lord's strength and decided to follow him. Not only the Mainas, but everyone who served in the palace was pardoned, and they returned from the war, understanding that everything happened when their young beloved participated in the war. After being overthrown as crown prince, a huge weight fell on the protagonist's heart when she realized that Kachar was no longer preparing to be the king of the Mainas. Hearing a knock on his door, the Lord gave permission for them to enter. The Duke received the lady with a mocking smile, noticing her sweet sleep, in which she had completely forgotten about him. While the girl admired the dazzling morning beauty, the boy approached and asked why she had come. Somewhat embarrassed, Aileen reminded him of Kachar's words, who had declared that she could change the interior to her liking. Assuming it was her mistake, the Duke declared that she should not worry about the expenses. The protagonist also asked to be allowed to find an interior specialist herself and direct everything. All this was to attract Princess Frick, and for that, he needs to meet personally with the head of Elvatoria. Although her personality is very different from Kachar's, she is number one for the role of his girlfriend. He wanted to find him a girlfriend before he fell in love with Elsie to prevent a continental war. But at that moment, the girl felt a strange sensation, as if something was holding her back. The Duke became curious how the lady was going to find the right person, to which she replied that she would go to the Guild Street. The boy suggested they go together on a date, but Eileen refused and said she wanted to go alone, and at most take one person. These words worried Kachar, and after thinking a little, he rummaged in one of the closets, after which he took out a beautiful large blue necklace adorned with precious jewels. Looking at the object, the lady marveled, but also felt as if she had seen it before. It turned out to be the key to the fog barrier, and Kachar explained that he gave it to her because she couldn't take Michael with her forever. The girl became distressed about the price of the magic stone, but he put it on her and ordered her never to take it off. The protagonist was shocked by such a beautiful and costly gift. It far surpassed all previous gifts from Kachar. 3 whole days passed since the Duke gave her the stone. He took the lady to the training ground and told her that before her departure, they had to resolve something. In a few moments, the soldiers training noticed the Lord's presence. Afterwards, 3 bloodied soldiers approached her, causing her a slight startle. The soldiers affirmed that they respected the lady very much, as she must be very strong to make the Lord fall in love. Ignoring all that, Kachar asked the lady to choose an escort, someone responsible for her outings. Hearing that, the big guys immediately lit up, begging for the position. Since they also wanted to fight her, the girl hesitated whether they wanted to protect her or murder her. Furthermore, she didn't like those soldiers being so showy, so she looked for someone else. Scanning the square with her gaze, the protagonist was shocked. She didn't expect to see Ludvian there. This left her completely perplexed. This boy was a famous spiritual swordsman, with tremendous power in the novel. In the novel, this man supports Kachar and joins Miguel. Right during Elsie's kidnapping, the boy was special because he was a half-elf, and he could communicate with spirits. Elsia taught him to use his powers, so he adored her, but never dared to confess his love to her. While Aileen remained paralyzed, Kachar wanted to know if she had chosen a knight to escort her. The girl felt very uncomfortable realizing his appearance, and quickly pointed to Ludvian. The other knights were indignant. They didn't believe that weakling could protect her. The protagonist explained that if she traveled by carriage with any of them, he wouldn't resist. Furthermore, Aileen pointed out that he was also a knight, and that, with his sword, he would protect her worthily. Upon seeing Aileen, Ludvian was so shocked that without realizing it, his mouth fell open. Kachar coldly asked if he could entrust him with the protection of his beloved. Faced with this, the knight immediately knelt down and swore he would give his life to protect her if entrusted. Seeing the Duke testing his knight, the lady felt uncomfortable, as it seemed more like preparation for war than a trip to the city. Approaching the young man, the protagonist told him she was delighted to meet the knight. While the young lady was happy to have such talent available, Kachar warned about betrayal and its consequences. The next morning, before the trip, the twins came to see Aileen, wishing to accompany her. But the lady refused and told them it would be next time, as she now had matters to attend to. Thanking the children for their understanding, the protagonist promised to bring them gifts. At that moment, Kachar approached stealthily from behind, carefully hugging her, and asking if he would also get a gift. Looking at her beloved's dazzling face, the young lady wondered why he touched her more and more. This started happening right after they went to see the mantises, but the girl still can't get used to it. Aileen promised to prepare dinner upon arrival, after which Kachar leaned close to her ear and asked if she wouldn't return before nightfall. At such whispers, the protagonist turned red as a tomato, but before she could react, the boy unexpectedly kissed her. Because of this, the girl disconnected from reality, starting to imagine marrying him. And the image of having 2 children in the future, with whom Kachar would affectionately play, also appeared to her. These thoughts didn't leave the lady for a long time, which worried the knight. The young lady realized that she was so absorbed in her thoughts about the Duke that she didn't even notice how she had reached the carriage. The girl thought this was already like an illness, but she didn't understand why Kachar kissed her on the cheek. The thoughts overwhelmed her so much that her face changed, and she turned very red. To calm the knight and not stop the carriage, the lady said she simply missed her beloved very much, after which a rather awkward silence formed between them. The protagonist felt so uncomfortable because it was the first time she was alone with someone. Besides Kachar and the twins, looking at the knight, Aileen thought that if the Duke was a beast man, this one was rather a handsome melancholic. After thinking about it, the girl noticed that her beloved was more virile, and then she reproached herself for thinking so much about him. The knight became curious to know why Lady Harleen had chosen him. Aileen explained that, although the boy wasn't the strongest knight, the others were too huge. The young lady also pointed out that just being in the Duke's training ground was enough to understand that he was a worthy knight. And moreover, with a smile, she affirmed that she didn't believe he was inferior to other knights. Upon arriving at the place, the protagonist decided to ask Sir Ludvian if he could promise her something. Without hesitating for a second, the boy was immediately willing to listen to the order. Aileen asked not to tell Kachar where they had gone today. Since he is not his subordinate, the young lady doubted whether the boy would grant her request, but the lady's fears were unfounded. After receiving his consent, the protagonist hurried to quickly get out of the carriage. Before them appeared an extremely lively guild street with quite tall buildings. Looking around, Aileen searched for the correct guild, and she also remembered that if you entered an alley, you could find those who dealt in dangerous things. The knight Ludvian wanted to pull out a map to know exactly where they should go. But the protagonist, shouting, suddenly grabbed his hand and stopped him. The lady knew that if they looked at the map or around for too long, they would suspect they weren't from there. Without giving explanations, and without letting go of the knight's hand, Harlan ran towards an uncertain destination. Eventually, they stumbled upon the bar, the Elven Oak Barrel, with the best alcohol in Eliftoria. After asking him to cover his face with the cloak, the young lady was about to enter. When the boy asked if the lady wanted to go to a bar, the protagonist immediately clarified that it wasn't what he thought. She was thinking, and he would understand upon entering. Seeing the knight's flushed face, the girl asked if he was hot. Taking the hand that Lady Harlan held, the knight replied that he was perfectly fine. Cloaks on, they entered the establishment and approached the barman. He showed no sign of interest and simply asked what the customers desired. Gathering courage and determination, Aileen said she wanted a green caterpillar with mushrooms. In the novel, the young lady remembered that when he howled at Kachar, he hid in a temple. But to her misfortune, they also wanted to keep her there, so she ran to the guild headquarters, since she had a good relationship with Vittoria. Eileen was happy to remember the password, because to enter Friggy's office without stepping on mines, you must be the one guarding it or the one who built it. They walked until they found a closed door, but before reaching it, the man stopped, and turning around, he decided to find out who the guarantor of these new guests was. Faced with these words, the protagonist became very worried, as she knew nothing about that. All this was because the book said nothing about it, aside from the password. The lady worried about why the man had stopped right next to the axe hanging on the wall, but she still named Duke Vladis as the guarantor. The furious barman grabbed the weapon and rushed at them shouting. The knight Ludvian hurried to draw his sword and stood in front of his lady. But their fight was interrupted by an unexpected and powerful flash of green magic. This stopped their conflict immediately and captured everyone's attention. After this, a cheerful princess appeared before them in an elegant red dress. The warriors understood nothing, while their ladies chatted amicably. The princess recounted that she had sent Aileen many letters, and that she knew Aileen would move to the duke's castle, and that it was impossible to enter the duke's castle, as it was surrounded by a strong barrier. The girl thanked Robert for guiding her expected guests to her. In the blink of an eye, they were in a large and luxurious room, sitting at the table. The protagonist felt uncomfortable with her counterpart's strange look of admiration. But despite everything, the princess was intrigued to know how Aileen knew about that passage. And the young lady noticed that Aileen was not surprised that she was in charge here. Putting on a knowing look, the heroine said it was a secret and she had a secret source. Remembering that the princess was looking for her lady, she asked if it was about her lot in the auction. Smiling, the Aksha asked if the lady knew that her alcohol sold for the highest price. As the boss, she nodded. Wishing for exclusivity in selling that product, the girl blushed thinking that the Macchioli, the Vitter, would fly and bring a lot of money. Aileen said it wouldn't be much, but the Aksha was happy because less means more value. The princess asked if there were any requests for the product sale. Thinking, the heroine asked to build a shop just for elite alcohol. The Aksha asked if she could count on round black pastries in a package. The princess revealed that she found the last thing and decided to try a choco pie. She was amazed by so much sweetness and was curious to know what the white thing in the center was. Blushing with embarrassment, Aileen said it was marshmallow, which excited the AXA. After that, she jumped with joy and wanted to know where the young lady got such delicious recipes from. Therefore, the princess said she was willing to adjust the proportions to the protagonist's liking. The lady felt uncomfortable, as she knew she hadn't prepared it, but she understood that she needed money. Since Lewis and Evan must awaken their magical abilities in a year, and unable to control magic, they had to flee. Only the magic tower was adapted to stabilize such an amount of magic. But that would be like sending a baby to postgraduate school. And that's why Eileen decided to build something similar to a magic tower in the duchy, and then look for a tutor for the twins, and for that, a lot of money is needed. The lady knew that the tower was like a large magic stone, and she didn't want to leave everything to Kachar. But for some reason, the protagonist felt a persistent sense of unease. To begin their collaboration, the Aksha decided to enter into a contract with her. The princess wrote it with magic before her, which greatly impressed Aileen. Observing all the girls' perfection, the protagonist felt inexplicably bad. Then, calming down, she said she had two requests. One was to find an interior specialist, to which the Aksha replied that she was willing to help personally. And the second brought memories of her beloved. There were also doubts about her feelings, so she decided to leave the second request for later. The princess admitted to being greedy, but did not dare to push to accept the deal. And as a sign of friendship, she decided to give a gift. It turned out to be a special crystal magic sphere for communication. Just before leaving, the protagonist also asked them to look for a book, and then headed for the exit. The young lady knew this area became very dangerous at night, so she decided to return home as soon as possible. As the knight guided his lady through the narrow streets, she suddenly stopped him. The lady took out a book and declared it was a gift and a bribe for keeping her secret, extending a strangely looking book. The protagonist explained that it told how to summon spirits there, but Ludvian simply turned around and stated that he knew absolutely nothing about it. Spirit summoning is only possible for elves and special races from the 5 kingdoms. In the past, Ludvian's mother abandoned him because he was too bad at spirit summoning magic. Knowing that in the novel the boy was looking for a way to use it anyway, the girl declared that she believed in him, and she felt a very good energy in him, smiling because the knight finally accepted the gift. Aileen felt uncomfortable, but while the protagonist was daydreaming, a knight ran towards her and protected her with his back. The young lady was extremely embarrassed by such events and the closeness. The lady didn't understand what was happening until she suddenly heard an unknown voice. A crowd of bandits was approaching them, wanting to steal everything they had. Faced with this, the protagonist felt fear, while Ludvian remained alert. In an instant, Aileen noticed they were approaching from behind, completely surrounding them. The young lady understood there were too many enemies, and that there is always danger when taking shortcuts. Unable to wait, the bandits decided to attack them, and the knight asked her not to move away. The boy concentrated too much on the enemies in front and didn't see a big guy approaching them. Seeing the very expensive necklace, he immediately raised his sword against the protagonist. But at that instant, the magic stone exploded and stopped the attack, and it also emitted a powerful glow that shattered the sword. Terrified and in tears, the lady suddenly felt a familiar warmth and a voice telling her that he had warned her about the outside danger. The young lady thought Kachar was hallucination again, but immediately realized that was not the case. Looking at the Duke with a terribly strong heartbeat, the protagonist decided to accept that she liked him. And a little later, they finally returned to the castle, where they had been waiting for them for a long time. The lady apologized to the children for what happened, and Louis hurried to ask about the gifts and how fun the outside was. Aileen froze, as she had completely forgotten about them, but because of that the twins thought the young lady was sick, which Kachar confirmed and told them about the attack. Hugging his beloved, the Duke told the princes not to be afraid because of that, since he had saved her. Feeling uncomfortable, the protagonist confessed to Louis and Evan that she had forgotten the gifts. The children said it didn't matter, as their gift was her safety. The younger brother was downcast. He wanted to protect her himself. He thought about learning fencing, but she suggested studying magic. Louis was interested in the idea, and the lady explained that they would both study and she would look for a good teacher. Kachar said they needed tutors for all the subjects a prince must know. The children, somewhat whimsical, thought magic was enough, but the Duke explained that they wouldn't be knights that way. The brothers wished good night and went to their rooms. Walking alone with Kachar down the hall, the protagonist couldn't stop looking at him. He noticed it and asked what she was thinking, but she, embarrassed, remembered the promised dinner. Even though it was late, the Duke said that if she really wanted to do something for him, she should first go to his room. The protagonist's heart cannot resist Kachar, who shines brightly over her knees. Her beloved was intrigued that she wasn't looking at him, and the lady explained it was because of the broken necklace. And expensive, but the Duke clarified that there was no reason to worry, as it was a single-use item. He added another spell for the barrier, rendering the magic stone completely useless. The lady remembered that this necklace was identical to the one Elsie wore in the original story. After Elsie escaped from Kachar, Michael gave her this necklace because he didn't want to lose her. And she also remembered the magic locked inside the necklace. In times of danger, it summoned the person the wearer most wished to see. Before the start of the original novel, Kachar had it, and the lady destroyed such an important object. Sighing, the boy declared that if she regretted it so much, then she should hug him, as that relieves the headache. Contemplating the Duke's flawless face, the protagonist's heart threatened to leap out of her chest. Mikhail and Ludvian are not ugly either, but Aileen didn't feel her heartbeat like that for them. And a mere instant later, they lay facing each other. The protagonist, terribly embarrassed, wanted to know if the man before her was asleep. The girl was amazed that he, lying beside her, could sleep so deeply. Aileen thought that only her heart was beating fast, and that it was because she wasn't a princess. But still, being next to the Duke, it was she who had the opportunity to seduce him. Then it occurred to her, why look for a beloved for him when she herself could do it? Which greatly encouraged her. Dressed in a beautiful dress, the protagonist was writing something on a piece of paper. The servants, who were actively spying on her, were amazed by her beauty. Aileen tormented herself thinking she was worse than she really was. Upon receiving notice of a visitor, the protagonist rushed to receive them. She was glad she hadn't mentioned Kashar and trusted they would never meet, except through her. But instead of the expected interior designer, the lady met a princess. It turns out Lady Friggy is passionate about interior design. And showing a bunch of certificates, the girl proved her qualification. The protagonist hoped the acquaintance hadn't come to get close to the Duke. Taking a look, the princess immediately realized that everything was done in the main style. Smiling and asking to take charge of the matter, the Aksha decided to meet with Kachar. Faced with such an unexpected request, the protagonist felt very uncomfortable. And as if fate willed it, right at that moment, the Duke came to see the guest. Kachar was leaning against the wall, arms crossed and a face of evident displeasure. The princess bowed to Vladis and told him it had been a long time since they had seen each other. Approaching and hugging his beloved, Kachar decided to find out what the Aksha wanted from him. Listening to their conversation, the protagonist understood nothing and noticed a strange sigh. Sadness flooded Aileen as she began to suspect that the princess was his first love. The Aksha asked if the Duke had paid all future expenses. Upon learning that he had, using the excuse of discussing calculations, they both went to a separate room. Spying on them, the young lady was surprised, thinking they made a beautiful couple and looked like lovers. Feeling great disappointment, the protagonist remembered that she herself wanted to unite them. After talking, the AXA said they agreed to follow what Aileen likes and not worry about money. And while the protagonist doubted whether they really only talked about money, a childish voice was heard in the hallway. It was the twins, armed with an obvious sword, who were currently playing knights. Louis introduced himself to the guest and also hurried to introduce his grumpy brother. Laughing and calling them adorable, the lady introduced herself as Frigga. The protagonist noticed that her friend was also affectionate with children, so she was sure that she was the ideal candidate to be the Duke's beloved. After chatting a little more, the young princes ran off to continue playing in the hallways. Looking at them, Frigga said they are definitely members of Richard's imperial family. She also said that she feels an enormous magical energy coming from them, which could be wonderful, or perhaps dangerous. Hearing this, Aileen immediately decided to find out if she could introduce them to someone who could teach them magic. The AXA explained that she would do it gladly herself, but she has no time for anything. The lady was displeased and asked for someone to volunteer, to which Frigga replied that it was unnecessary, since there was already an exceptional mage. Aileen supposed her friend was referring to the assistant Michael, to which she felt. Afterwards, the princess decided to share his nickname at the magic tower, meaning they called him Grey Psychopath. Frigga, laughing, said they nicknamed him that because his laboratory was completely gray. But the problem was that one day it exploded, and the entire magic tower turned gray. Everyone was perplexed, not knowing what to do, and felt uncomfortable with the appearance. But Michael was the only one who, upon seeing the new color, said it was beautiful now. Afterwards, the boy paid for the cleaning of the magic tower and was then exiled. And as if on purpose, at that moment Michael approached them from behind. He was curious what the ladies were chattering about so vividly. The assistant also became curious. What was the Aksha doing there? So, his friend told him that although he didn't like him, he could ask him for help without hesitation. And before the protagonist could react, Frigga was already rushing to inspect thoroughly. Looking at the assistant, the protagonist hesitated whether she should ask him. Gathering her thoughts, Aileen finally decided to ask him for a minute. Noticing the look on Alaksha's back, the protagonist asked if he liked the princess. Embarrassed and turning around, the boy wondered why they were asking him that, to which the protagonist explained that she had noticed a loving look in him. After this, Mikkel became even more embarrassed. He even felt uncomfortable. Madam. Aileen recounted her conversation with the princess, but the assistant corrected. It wasn't the tower, but Frigga. He was fascinated by the image of El-Aksha against a gray background. What a striking scene. The boy added that he planned to leave the tower soon to finish his gift. The protagonist caught on immediately. Of course, he was referring to the gray earrings. In the second half of the original novel, Frigga fought alongside Elsie as an archmage. Catcher almost killed her when the earrings broke. They were her shield against an attack. Knowing that Michael made them, she didn't understand why he didn't confess his love and let her kill him. The assistant revealed that at first, he saw her as just another scammer, claiming to cure the Lord's mania. But over time, he understood he was wrong, and she understood why Michael was so cold to her. The boy bowed to her to apologize, although it was already too late. And in that relaxed chat, Aileen thought it was a good opportunity to ask him about the prince's education. After thinking about it, the boy decided to accept and help with this as an apology for his behavior. After that, he apologized for having brought Lady Frigga there. Realizing the young lady knew nothing, although Mikkel wanted to annoy her, he decided to do it next time. They headed to the office, from where a lot of noise was coming, and then began to listen carefully. It turned out to be a verbal argument between the Duke and the princess. And it turns out there were many conflicts between them where neither party wanted to give in. Observing the fight between a member of the imperial family and the archmage, it was impressive. Mikkel explained that they had been enemies for a long time because their areas of business interest constantly coincided. Unable to stand it any longer, the Duke declared that she had been brought there on purpose to annoy her. Aileen replied that she had no idea, that she didn't do it on purpose. The princess ran to hug her friend, asking her to scold Kachar and not understanding how she could date him. Hearing that, the boy suggested throwing the guest out. But the princess said she was there as Lady Aileen's friend. Frigga decided to ask her friend if it was really possible to build a lasting relationship with someone of such a bad temper. She also said that the Duke had many eccentricities, but the lady was disturbed for an instant. And she kept thinking. The princess became worried, thinking that perhaps her friend was threatened, and that was why she was willing to help. The protagonist, after much thought, could only say that she liked Kachar. After that sentence, a deathly and awkward silence fell upon the room. Aileen went into shock, as she planned to confess to him in a more romantic setting. While cutting a steak, the girl was sure she had ruined everything. When her beloved ran to her, wanting to know since when, blushing and visibly embarrassed, the girl avoided his gaze, hesitating how to answer. Frigga understood that, initially, they had not met, but the Duke silenced her with his power, because Aileen likes him. Blushing, the boy begged her to repeat those words, and palpable emotion could be seen in his eyes. Taking her beloved's hands, the protagonist repeated that she liked Kachar. Furious, the princess grabbed Mikkel and suggested having tea, muttering that she didn't understand how the Duke used magic better than a mage. As soon as they were alone, they moved slowly towards the nearest sofa. Looking at her with a smile, Kachar asked why the protagonist was putting him through such a roller coaster. But the young lady believed he had started it, to which the Duke explained that Aileen was holding the knife, and she didn't know what he was thinking. Immediately after, with an expression of happiness and a trembling voice, Kachar declared that he liked Aileen. Then, gently touching the protagonist's face, his heart beat like never before. The protagonist made it clear that cheating is not allowed, to which the Duke replied that if she did, the poor thing would lose all his limbs. Horrified for an instant, Aileen promised not to be unfaithful, and the boy swore that he too would be faithful. After this, overflowing with a storm of emotions and feelings, he kissed his beloved with compassion and tenderness. 3 days have passed since Frigga's visit, and the renovation of the main mansion is in full swing. She herself supervised the work to ensure everything was carried out as planned. Even the maids joined the work to finish the reconstruction as soon as possible. All the valuable statues, of which the Mains were so proud, were among the first to be torn down. But that wasn't the point. The protagonist's mood was incredibly happy. Emma started worrying if everything was all right with her mistress, since flowers were even growing on her head. She even thought that if she had wings, she would fly away immediately, and the world would be beautiful and full of happiness. And this idyllic scene was interrupted by the unexpected words of her friend, which sounded clearly distressed. Only rage and indignation remained in the previously cheerful Lady Frigga. Although the princess was furious, she decided to triple the price for that interior design. Taking out the plan, the protagonist asked to modify one part of the interior concept. Aileen understood that they were fitting the house as if for newlyweds, and that's why she thought the children would like them to build a pond behind the house. Frigga didn't understand some things on the plans, but the protagonist immediately explained that it was an on-call. Sensing an opportunity, the young lady became enthusiastic and asked them to set up a business with it. The Aksha begged tearfully, since the Duke had taken everything from her, and with that they could build a great business. With the plans in her possession and already happy about the closed deal, the friend hurried to convey the requests to the artisans. Seeing the sunlight illuminating her abode, the young lady was happy to say goodbye to King Manos's castle. The protagonist watched the head maid pass by her. Not getting an answer, Aileen became alarmed seeing a bandage on her eyes. The young lady hurried to catch up to find out what was happening. Stopping her and asking, the protagonist made Estra uncomfortable. The lady understood that she couldn't see the sunlight, so the maid apologized for bothering her. The protagonist decided to find out if anyone else among the servants had this problem. Aileen felt bad for being happy without thinking about others' problems and decided not to leave it like that. The next morning, the young lady quickly went to look for the head maid. Afterwards, the protagonist declared that she wanted to give her a gift and extended a box to her. Upon unwrapping it, Estra didn't understand what this strange thing in front of her was. Aileen explained that they were sunglasses. They protect the eyes from the sun's rays. The protagonist was very happy that the shop had a glasses section. The lady suggested trying them on. Estra obeyed and was amazed. The head maid was surprised that her eyes didn't hurt and how long it had been since she saw the sun. Aileen said to keep the gift and that she wouldn't change the annex where the Mains live. Estra called the lady a benefactor because with her arrival at the castle, always quiet, it had brightened up a lot. She was sincerely grateful to Lady Harleen, but after a pause, she corrected herself and called her future mistress. A month passed since the start of the renovation, and they finally finished everything. Frigga was extremely happy to have finished the work so quickly. The west and east wings of the castle were made in the Hanok style. The lady was fascinated by how well the Texas roof and the Getty statues at the entrance fit. The protagonist admired the artisans, who managed to recreate them just by seeing her keychain. The butler also loved the beauty of the beasts, and the young lady explained that they ward off bad energy. Drake wanted to see them live, but the young lady said that perhaps they are as hard to find as a dragon. They also installed underfloor heating, but the most important thing is that they built their own magic tower. This arose as a result of the colossal efforts of Michael and Frigga. Those most fascinated by the magic tower were precisely the twins. Aileen confirmed that the tower is real, and she also introduced them to a master. He decided to greet the twins again, but only as a mage. Michael Evans. Inspired by the upcoming lessons, the children were bursting with energy. Aileen loved Evans's and Lewis's seriousness, and asked them if they liked the tower. Lewis immediately announced happily that it was horribly beautiful, and he would try very hard. But something obviously worried Evan, although he also said he would try hard. The girl understood that the younger one's eagerness was different, as he always tries to give his best. To relax him a little, the young lady unexpectedly kissed the boy on the cheek. The protagonist asked him not to overdo it, as she would worry if something happened to him, and kissed Lewis. And at that moment, Aileen is suddenly lifted into her beloved's arms. It turns out the Duke heard the sounds of the kisses and demanded that they only do it with him. Noticing his jealous reaction, Evan proudly and boldly asked for the kiss to be repeated. Aileen was embarrassed by such behavior, and such declarations clearly annoyed Kachar. The Duke explained to the little one that only lovers do that, but Evan just smiled and said he couldn't do anything if she kissed him first. And while idyllic peace reigned in the duchy, important events were unfolding in Shayna's temple. In the central room, illuminated by light, stood a large statue of the goddess, and also, in one of the offices, 5 priests gathered around a table. They were happy that huge donations had been made at the past Alaja festival. This will greatly help the temple, but they were intrigued to know how such a sum was managed to be raised at the auction. The donations were in the name of Evan and Lewis, and their nanny had provided the product. The priest of the 5th temple declared that it was necessary to know more about her, and he also stated that it would be great to present her as the birth of an apostle. Another priest doubted it, as he didn't know if a large donation would be obtained the following year. Besides the saint being born soon, they were worried on the house continent, and the saint of the goddess Shayna had not yet been born. The priests were worried that without a saint, it would be difficult to raise donations. But the priest, with a mocking smile, only declared that everything was by the grace of the goddess. A Macchioli sales hall and a luxury snack shop were inaugurated in Nika Square in the capital. All reviews and newspapers wrote about it, which quickly made them popular. Although the protagonist didn't go there personally, she noticed how popular the place was through the surveillance crystal. To educate the young princes, qualified teachers recommended by Kachar started visiting the castle, so that people wouldn't be too surprised by the Mainas with the domestic magic tower. They made them look human. Guests who could see through the mist, the renovation of the castle began to spread rumors, and the Elvitter organization received many orders. Overall, due to all this, the fame of the duchy grew day by day. The servants again watched the future mistress who was writing something. Waiting for night, Aileen hurried to collect the princes to put them to bed. Louis said he got 100 points in history, and they were allowed to ask questions if they got them. Evan, as always, was quiet, unlike his older brother, and Aileen asked if he liked the magic classes. The children noticed it wasn't time for bed yet, and so asked why they were being put to bed already. To get by, the young lady invented a story that children in the new country, to grow taller and stronger, go to bed and wake up earlier. Trying to put them to bed quickly, the protagonist was already thinking about the capital's street festival. Aileen terribly doubted how to invite her beloved on a date, and so, to avoid tormenting herself, the young lady decided to send a classic-style letter. Dressed in a dress and accessories, the lady was happy that the preparation for the date was complete. Upon stepping out onto the street, the girl already noticed her beloved waiting for her. Kachar looked even more handsome when he asked if she had made him wait long, and she smiled at his surprise. But instead of answering, the boy had a very embarrassed and worried expression. Looking everywhere, the protagonist assumed she had invited him for the next day at 8 in the evening. In front of the central garden, unsigned, Kachar explained that at first he thought some big guy had invited him to a duel. What a scare! Embarrassed, the lady clarified that it was an invitation to a date. What a misunderstanding! This surprised the Duke, but the protagonist explained that there would be a night festival in the capital. Smiling and taking his beloved, the boy said he would prefer they went straight to bed. How daring! Offended by this, since they barely knew each other, the lady was indignant. That's being too hasty. To appease her, Kachar kissed her hand and said he loved the letter precisely because Aileen had written it. After that, the protagonist managed to convince him to accompany her to the festival. Finally, the lady was embarrassed and happy just from walking hand in hand. The Duke, observing the stalls, noticed something unusual. The protagonist asked what was wrong, but the boy pointed to a bear and said it looked like her. Looking closer, Aileen could distinguish a plush toy. To the girl, it looked more like a cursed thing. But Kasha didn't care and was already asking how to get it. Upon receiving 5 darts, the Duke had to score 100 points to win the toy. Realizing their visitors already had a target, the stall owner said they needed to score 20 points each time. But before he could finish speaking, with one movement, Kasha hit all the darts perfectly in the center. Handing it to the protagonist, the boy explained that it was a response to her letter. Faced with such a romantic gesture, Aileen's heart began to beat faster. Up close, the bear was even more terrifying. But hearing another couple, the young lady felt she should kiss him too. Filled with confidence and resolution, the lady finally decided to follow the date rule. Due to her strong heartbeat and nervousness, Aileen lost her balance and clumsily kissed Kasher on the cheek. And at that moment, ruining the whole atmosphere, a drunk and satisfied old man ran past them. After that, Aileen was very embarrassed and complained that she had given him a very clumsy kiss. Kasha, observing the protagonist's energetic reaction, laughed sincerely. When the fireworks started, the Duke took the opportunity, taking the girl's hand and leading her somewhere. Turning the corner, he accused her of having lied to him when she said she had already kissed many times. Aileen was confused and didn't understand why her beloved was so good at physical relationships. But Kasha declared that perhaps he was born to meet a girl who doesn't know how to kiss. Bringing his face close carefully, the Duke declared that the young lady was clumsy and should try harder. Although the festival was still ongoing, and the fireworks illuminated the night sky with more intensity, Aileen was completely absorbed in her beloved's kiss. After a while, the couple continued strolling through the festival. Observing the varied food, the protagonist marveled at remembering that the best thing about festivals is the food. The lady perfectly remembered that Kachar couldn't taste, so she decided it was her chance to take the initiative. Afterwards, they headed to the lakeside, where the young lady had prepared everything for a picnic. The Duke was surprised that his beloved had prepared everything, to which she replied not to underestimate a woman's purse. Sitting next to him, the young man felt curious about the little box the lady held in her hands. Since it was magic food, it was still hot and contained a roasted chicken. The boy was genuinely shocked by the aroma. It was very different from the smell of blood he always perceives. With intrigue and curiosity, the Duke hurried to taste the dish as soon as possible. Seeing him, Aileen realized her beloved looked like a model promoting fried chicken. Afterwards, the girl proposed to Kasia to make a toast, because chicken with beer is a sacred law, and so they spent the afternoon together, contemplating the beautiful views of the lake. And in a short time, they ate all the chicken and drank quite a bit of alcohol. The Duke was curious how his beloved cooked. Aileen decided to corroborate her knowledge and asked if the mania was a curse or not. Furthermore, the young lady declared that she wanted to break the curse and remove that thing from Kasia's back. Looking sadly at the sky, her beloved confessed that he hated the mark more than anything. Aileen thought there was less than a year left until Elsie woke up as a saint. The fruits to Luby are only a temporary measure. Only Elsie's power can break the curse. But instead of a clear answer, the boy began to approach the protagonist and declared that he knew a better way to break the curse. 10,000 kisses from Aileen. Indignant that she was being pressured before completing her list of perfect dates, the young lady protested, but she yielded to his trick. And exhausted, she fell asleep right there. The Duke covered the protagonist, worried about her health. Looking at his sleeping beloved, a storm of thoughts flooded his mind. For the first time, he realized his feelings for her on the balcony at the Alak party. When the young lady touched his forehead, the boy felt a glow on his back and realized that she was special. But the moment Aileen was about to be whipped, Kachar realized that for him, she wasn't just a tool. When the protagonist faced danger, the Duke wanted to destroy them all. And he felt all this for the first time. The Duke understood that she not only cured the side effect of the alubai fruits, but that she affected the curse. He had wanted to get rid of the curse for so long, but now he only cared that Aileen stayed by his side. He saw how drunk his beloved was, and laughed when he saw that he had been given soda, while she was drinking alcohol, and while the Duke carried the protagonist in his arms. A bright light emerged from his chest. The boy recognized the phenomenon instantly, but his voice only reflected concern. Time passed since that night, and the lady was teaching the chef how to prepare her food. The chef marveled at all the protagonist's innovative ideas. The chef was grateful to be able to learn how to cook a new dish that day. Calm now, the lady hurried to see the princes. Aileen was impressed by their diligence and calm during the lessons. She was worried they had started a bit late, but surprisingly they were grasping everything perfectly. Walking down the castle hallway and looking out the window, the girl was surprised to see a familiar face. It was Sir Ludvian, whom the protagonist hadn't seen in a very long time. So, to get his attention, the young lady called him directly from the window. But instead of the expected reaction, the knight, as soon as he made eye contact with Aileen, ran away from her. The girl became curious to know the reason why Sir Ludvian was fleeing from her. And the next instant, the knight again heard the lady's voice approaching his back. Upon turning around, he saw an imposing girl demanding he stay still, so he continued fleeing, until the lady suddenly tripped on a stone. To avoid falling, a strong wind appeared that straightened her up again. The knight was worried about Lady Harlan's well-being. He was truly distressed. Aileen understood. It was a spirit. What luck! The knight could summon it in the book, but he had no form yet. Ludwian felt terrible discomfort from his mistress's gaze. Calmer now, Lady Harlan decided to find out why they wanted to flee from her. He considered himself a sinner and kneeling, wanted to pay with his own life. But the protagonist asked him to calm down because she hated blood. Taking the knight's hand, she stopped his attempt to unsheath his sword, and also, embarrassed, declared that if he tried to draw his sword, she would truly get angry. Faced with this, Ludvian averted his gaze, and the knight's face flushed at moments. Calming down, Aileen congratulated the knight on summoning the spirit. It was something amazing. The young lady also pointed out that he protected her back then, and if he regrets it, he should keep protecting her. Noticing the falling leaves, the girl understood that, just like that, autumn had arrived. Remembering that her beloved's birthday was in just 1 week, the young lady became very distressed. After this, Lady Harlan hurried to get a gift on Nike Street in the capital. As one of the first gifts, they decided to choose something practical, like a feather or a tie. Upon hearing this, the knight suggested going to the accessories store next door. But to their bad luck, the manager came out and, ringing a bell, announced that the reception was over if one did not have a number. Aileen wanted to enter a popular store, which many people went to, but it turned out to be her store. The girl suggested entering the store that had just closed, just for a second. The boy, seeing the couple approaching, told them that the tickets for today were sold out. Upon approaching, the lady said she knew perfectly well, but she loves chocolate cakes. The employee instantly knew she was the manager, but the knight understood nothing of what was happening. Upon entering, a very luxuriously decorated store with an incredible design awaited them. On a special plate, after a whole shift, exactly one choco pie remained. The heroine loved how everything was organized and the fact that everything was top-notch. The knight asked if it was true that this store belonged to the lady, who immediately confirmed it, although she also said she had never been there before. After looking enough and realizing that everything was fine, Aileen was about to proceed with her business when she heard a familiar voice. It was Jayana Andres, the first villain of the novel, and the young lady was curious to know what she was doing there. The protagonist remembered that she was the one who won it at the Alaj festival, so she doubted Yayan wanted to see her. Miss Andres accused Lady Croft of jumping the line, provoking. Lady Croft mocked Yayan's furious reaction over a simple dessert. An employee rushed to stop the dispute, surprised and disbelieving at the possibility of two identical tickets. After receiving and examining them, the employee couldn't believe what she saw. But Lady Aileen interrupted, requesting to see the tickets personally. Kraft immediately became indignant, asking why they were interfering. Faced with such a negative reaction, the protagonist took off her hood and revealed herself to be the store director. The ladies were perplexed, but Aileen insisted they not delay her and hand over the tickets as soon as possible. After observing them, Harleen immediately identified and pointed out the one that did not belong to her store. Kraft was sure they were identical, but it turned out the paper had a special print. In the light, her unique seal could be seen, so, to get by, the lady decided to claim that a store clerk had given her the ticket. Aileen smiled calmly and said that now they could quickly verify Lady Kraft's lies using the security cameras. Harleen explained that they were installed at the entrance for the store's security. Kraft, indignant, turned around and declared that she would never return to that place. Seeing the lady leave with a chocolate cake, Aileen shouted that the offender could leave like that, but in return, she would ban her from her store. At that moment, right at the entrance, the protagonist's maid appeared, who was in a great hurry. She informed Emma, while she was in the storage room, that the female clients had fought. Aileen also asked her to sprinkle some salt to get rid of the bad energy in the place. Afterwards, the protagonist took out a chocolate cake and gave it to Miss Andres. The lady was about to bid farewell to the guest, who wanted to pay her in the future for her kindness. But inspiration struck Aileen, and so she decided to ask her for help at that very moment. And then Harleen announced a shopping trip with Shiana. Observing the accessories, the girl understood that both were gorgeous. Noticing Aileen's doubt and indecision, Jayana assumed she was looking for a gift for the Duke. Upon hearing that they were all beautiful, but none perfect, Lady Andres sighed. Then she pointed her finger and stated that something like that would be ideal for a gift. At first, the protagonist was surprised by such a non-obvious choice. Twins, but observing them closely, the twins shone, adorned with rubies. And Aileen knew they would look perfect on her beloved. Yajana also took a look and commented that they would perfectly match another item. It turned out to be a matching brooch, very beautiful. Although they were different, they had the same design. The protagonist thanked Miss Andres, who was able to help her with her choice. It wasn't so difficult for her to manage, as she has 3 older brothers. Believing they were done, Jayana was about to leave, but Aileen took her hand. Harleen asked her if she liked Duke Vladis. The protagonist explained that she asked that question because she wants to be his friend. Jayana immediately began to be indignant, as she feared her parents. Aileen said that in her time, it was enough to grow up and not cause trouble to settle the debt with the parents. The embarrassed Miss Andres finally decided to accept Aileen's friendship. The protagonist smiled broadly, as she was happy to make friends. They were going shopping to celebrate their friendship, when suddenly they heard a voice from behind. A young man on a white horse appeared before them, with a somewhat cruel and disdainful look. By the color of his eyes, Aileen recognized him. Before her stood Crown Prince Valentid. It was impossible not to recognize him, due to his appalling resemblance to Empress Bina. Although his status made him odious, they had to maintain formalities. The prince was surprised that these two ladies were friends, but Aileen immediately denied it. She explained that she had only accidentally stained Lady Andresa's dress and intended to compensate her. After a knowing look, the young ladies understood each other, and Hayana asked permission to withdraw. Upon leaving, Miss Andres warned her friend to be very careful, knowing that if she delayed a little with the prince, strange rumors would arise. Harlan wanted to leave, but he declared that he was going to tell her how to break Kachar's curse. Seeing her interest, the crown prince decided to start to change places. Aileen was uncomfortable, having an entire room in the store for him, and Ludvina was not allowed to enter and has to guard the door. The protagonist only wanted to listen and leave this company soon. The crown prince asked if the lady knew that Kachar's illness was a curse. Not even the emperor knows that the duke's mania was caused by the empress's curse. He declared that he knew the way to lift it, but would only say so if she went out with him. The conceited boy also said not to worry about his mother. If she found out Aileen was with him, the empress would forgive the girl's early rudeness. The crown prince confidently stated that it might seem like his mother had a harsh character, but in reality, he had a soft heart. Understanding and realizing his stupidity and self-love, the lady thought he was crazy. Not only was Valentid sure they would go out with him, but he also offered to apologize to his mother, who tried to kill her. Even if there was another option, she wouldn't continue listening to that nonsense. The lady, making a bow, announced that she rejected the proposal and would forget the talk. Furious, the crown prince attacked her, accusing her of being ungrateful. Feeling the pain, Aileen understood that Valentine was much crueler than he appeared. He believed he was right, and thought the rejection was due to her relationship with that monster. The prince didn't understand how the protagonist dared to refuse his help and wanted to punish her. But a knock on the door interrupted him, further enraging Valentine. Miss Enders burst into the room, despite the maid's attempts to stop her. Aileen knew her salvation had arrived, but she couldn't make a sound. After thinking a bit, her friend said the compensation was insufficient and demanded a check. Looking at the floor, the protagonist immediately recognized Hayana's bracelets. After breaking the bracelet, she accused the young lady of trying to compensate for her rudeness with a simple trinket. And on top of that, she declared that Aileen had not a shred of shame or conscience, just as they say. Playing along, Harlan asked what she had done to offend Lady Andres so much, but she insisted that she had every right to ask for compensation for the discourtesy. Seeing such a conflict, the crown prince was indignant at the behavior of the damsels in his presence. Miss Andres apologized for Aileen's rudeness and promised to take charge of her manners education. Valentid, frustrated and furious, said he had to leave and that they would all go out together immediately. The friends looked at each other with hatred, striving to maintain the farce they were playing. While the prince was leaving, the young women continued arguing incessantly, and at that very instant, Aileen heard a cheerful and very familiar voice. Turning around, the protagonist spotted a blonde boy near a white horse. Their gazes met, and an ephemeral peace blossomed in Aileen's heart. She was surprised that Kachar was there. She thought her escape was very secret. Valenti said he regretted having to say that, as they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Grabbing and pulling the protagonist towards him, the crown prince declared that Aileen was very interested in him. Harlan was shocked by what that scoundrel was saying, who had recently treated her so cruelly. Discontent and fury were visible in Kachar's eyes, bordering on a thirst for murder. While the crown prince was bragging, Duke Vladis began searching for his sword. Understanding what could happen, the lady resorts to a desperate maneuver, and she pretends her vision is blurring. And while cautiously passing by the crown prince, she took a strange object from her pocket. Immediately after, she stuck it on Valentine's behind so that he couldn't notice. And as soon as she finished, she ran to Kachar and told him she felt terrible for having walked too much. At that moment, a servant came to announce that it was time for the crown prince to go see the empress. Valentine felt incredible superiority and thought he was great for having managed to annoy Duke Vladis. But just as he mounted the chair, a very loud fart was heard from underneath him. It was so deafening that all the people around were surprised and paid attention to him. Seeing this, everyone felt great discomfort, just as a second equally loud fart occurred. From the crown prince's smug face, absolutely nothing remained at that precise moment, and the number of people watching Valentid and observing a deathly silence grew. One wrong move and another fart echoed. Even a child pointed it out. Aileen, embarrassed, feigned madness and asked if the prince didn't exercise his glutes. After those words, gossip and dirty comments flooded the crowd. The protagonist rejoiced at having humiliated the prince with the fart cushion. Hyuna was in shock. She couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. In the blink of an eye, the gossiping crowd dispersed. Feeling a penetrating gaze, the young lady understood why. Harlan did not tell him about her outing. Not reacting to the joke, Kashar questioned, "If the lady hates infidelity, why is her partner valianted?" As punishment, Duke Vladis considered chaining the young lady. Recalling the novel, Kachar also locked up Elsia, chaining her ankles. Fearing punishment, the lady explained that she only ran into him while choosing a gift. The boy didn't understand the gift, but Eileen declared that she was preparing it for her beloved's birthday. Although Kachar hadn't celebrated it since losing his crown prince status, the girl said that such an important day couldn't be missed. The protagonist wished the Duke a warm birthday, as he had never had one. And that's why Aileen explained that this day would be special. To which Kachar, adjusting his hair, said he would wait. The boy didn't know if a gift had already been chosen for him, but he would like to receive something mundane. Before giving an example, Kachar leaned close to the protagonist's ear and looked at the knight maliciously. The boy immediately sensed the evil intentions, so he hurried to move away. After which, Vladis declared that he would like to receive something like, "I am your gift." Using the necklace's magic, the couple immediately teleported to the Duke's rooms. The young lady asked them not to rush, as she wasn't ready yet, but she still responded to the kiss. The protagonist, very embarrassed and blushing, looked at her beloved. Kachar, standing right in front of Aileen, declared that he wished to receive his gift in advance. Harlan loved him, and so, without saying a word, she tenderly hugged the Duke. After that, she melted into a passionate kiss with the boy of her dreams. In the Lord's room, throughout the night, there was only romance and love. And so came a beautiful, sunny autumn morning with a light, refreshing breeze. This time, the protagonist no longer hurried to quietly escape Kachar's room. The lovers harmoniously and serenely enjoyed the sweet moment. The girl was fascinated that upon waking up, she had a muscular chest in front of her. And splendid. Recalling the previous night, the lady was embarrassed, but understood that the story had changed radically. Eileen was about to get up to leave the Duke, when he woke up suddenly and stopped her. The protagonist congratulated him once more on his birthday and said she had to get up to prepare something. Kazar was annoyed to have to part so soon, but the girl said they would see each other in the dining room. The cooks were already expecting the future mistress and had prepared all the necessary vegetables. They reported that almost all the dishes the lady taught them were ready. Aileen was happy to have been able to teach Korean cooking in advance. And now, she set out to finish the most important dish for the birthday. The lady was very enthusiastic, so she managed to prepare the beef mijikak quite quickly. The head maid reported that all preparations for the Lord's festive table were complete. A festive table with 12 dishes. The protagonist wanted to offer them, no matter the cost. Kachar was shocked to discover such a variety of exotic and unusual dishes. While he was astonished, Lady Eileen simply congratulated him once more on his birthday. Seeing the extravagant dish, the boy became very nervous. He wanted to know what that green dish in front of him was and what it was called. And right at that moment, a strong earthquake shook the entire duchy. The magic tower suffered the most, as it was shaking the most. Rushing out, Eileen immediately went to look for the twins to see if they were okay. The boy Louis ran to hug his nanny, but she asked where Evan was. Mikhail, worried and sweating, explained that the vibration came from the tower, and that the younger prince was not in the palace. This vibration was caused by the tower's magic, and it seems Evan is there. Terrified, Kachar ran to the tower. He had to save the little one. Louis, with tears in his eyes, also hurried after his brother. The protagonist could not leave them in that dangerous place, so she followed him. Upon entering, everything was covered in huge ice crystals. Looking up, Eileen got scared and became extremely worried. The prince was floating unconscious, surrounded by ice. Seeing him like that, the protagonist became more and more distressed for him. Kachar used his powers and rushed to free him immediately. After breaking the ice, Vladis caught Evan in his arms. Shivering from the cold, Aileen hurried to approach to see what was wrong with him. Kachar asked her not to get too close. The mana had not yet stabilized. Although it was early, the prince woke up. Aileen was perplexed. In the original story, there was a year left until the awakening, and the scene was a magic explosion. Everything changed too much. The protagonist didn't understand why only Evan woke up. Kachar explained that the child came instinctively, and if he hadn't found him, he would have frozen everything. Vladdy's stabilized his condition, but they will have to monitor him for a few days in the tower. Louis was worried about when his beloved brother Evan would wake up. Aileen hugged Louis and told him yes. They just had to wait a little. Mikkel explained that magical force is like a sea, and the entry point is a hole the size of a coin. Anyone who tries to master that force without the necessary skills is in danger. So now they will have to watch him closely, as Evan instinctively knows his enormous power, and he tries to control it. Kasher explained that he will stay by his side until this little one wakes up. A little calmer and smiling, the lady said that the dish her beloved asked about is called meat cook. His astonishment was so great that he unconsciously opened his mouth slightly, as it seemed familiar to him. Eileen begged him to try the dish, as this soup is prepared for birthdays. Precisely this dish, Katja remembered it from his childhood. His mother prepared it for the celebration.